Hi, Brittany. Thank you. You can hear us fine, right? I don't know why I said thank you. Okay, great.
It is 7 o'clock, right on. We want to welcome everyone out to the Highland City Council meeting on Tuesday, October 18th, 2022. We want to recognize that we have Councilmember Brittany Bills that is on the phone tonight, and we have the rest of the council members here. We will begin our council meeting with an invocation by Tim Ball, followed by a pledge of allegiance by Councilmember Scott Smith. Tim.
Council, city staff, and our friends and neighbors, we ask that thou might pour thy blessing out upon Highland, that we may continue to be a safe city, that we may continue to look at problems in a logical way, and that we ask that thou might bless us with inspiration, that we will be able to do what's best for Highland and for its citizens. We also ask that thou might bless the United States, that as we approach election season, that we will all vote and exercise our constitutional rights. These things we pray for and ask for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please stand and show respect to our country's flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we have set apart a time for unscheduled public appearances. We'd like to welcome anyone to come up that'd like to address the council on any topic that they see that's before the city. If you could keep your comments to 3 minutes. So we'd invite anyone at this time to come up for unscheduled public appearances. We do have a public hearing tonight on our agenda. Actually, sorry, we do not. I guess we have it's going to be a public hearing on the final plat? Okay. So we do not have a public hearing. So if you're here on any agenda item, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close our unscheduled public appearances and go on to our item number 2 on our agenda, which is presentations. We have our youth council that we'd like to invite to come up, and they will give us a report on the upcoming and what's been going on with the youth council.
Hi, I'm Sophia Thompson. I'm the government chair in Youth Council. This month we're excited because we have the Trick or Treat Street happening next week, and so we'll be helping at that. And we also have our applications open right now for the next year for Youth Council, so we're getting those coming in, and then we're also just getting ready and excited for our retreat in December at the Mayor's Cabin. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, one question. When does applications, the deadline? Do you guys know when that is? October 27th. Okay, thanks.
Good. Thank you. We now have a presentation from Waste Management to our Youth Council. We'd like to invite the Youth Council Mayor to please come up, and we invite Blake from Waste Management to please also come up. So if we have our Youth Council members and our Mayor, the Youth Council Mayor.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead and go.
First and foremost, thank you for having us. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your city.
Blake, would you just maybe state your name for the record?
Blake Leonelli, Waste Management. Here on behalf to present a check to the Youth Council for all the great work that you do. We appreciate being part of your city, and thank you very much. If you guys are okay with it being...
Everyone gather around him so they can maybe get a picture, please.
Absolutely, thank you. Have
Thank you. We really appreciate how much was it for again? $2,500 go to our youth council. Does the youth council accept the check? Yes. Well, there was a question. Do you understand what a check is? Because this is in paper form.
I do have to say what's funny about this is I'll bring this check to different places and they're like, well, hold on, we get to take the check. I'm like, you've got the money in your account.
We've already received it, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate them coming, and thank you for the youth council showing up in that. We appreciate that. We now have a special presentation. It's a certification of our municipal clerk recognition. We have our own city recorder that has went to do through some training, and I think it's taken a couple of years to get the certification. So we want to invite up the UMCA president, Jackie Nostrom, to come up and recognize our city recorder, Stephanie Cottle, of achievement of certification of a municipal clerk designation. And we'd probably also like to invite Stephanie's husband maybe to come up also.
Oh, yes, that would be fantastic. We would love a picture. Can we?
Tyler, I think, has some pictures, but if Audrey want to help, you can.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to present and celebrate with all of you, and especially Stephanie. My name again is Jackie Nostrom. I'm the city recorder for Harriman City, and I'm also the UMCA president. I'm here tonight representing the UMCA and the International Institute of Municipal Clerks to celebrate and recognize Stephanie for all of the hard work that she has put into achieving the Certified Municipal Clerk designation, which we also refer to as CMC. To achieve this CMC designation, Stephanie had to complete over 240 hours of in-class coursework, including an additional 50 experience points. That can count as doing hands-on on the job, helping out the association, there's things like that. But helping out the association, serving on boards, you get about 1 credit hour per year of service doing one of those tasks. So it does take a lot of time and dedication. It's also considered to be an equivalent of an associate's degree, to kind of put it in a comparison for you all. She couldn't have earned this certification without the support of city leadership. And we want to say thank you for your continued support in her education and making sure that everything for this city is on the up and up. I would like to present Stephanie with her plaque from the IIMC and then just a small gift.
Maybe you can turn around so they can get a picture there with the plaque.
We need to do.
Want to show the plaque?
Can I get you to do a picture off this one? And one with just the camera.
Now, Stephanie, we know you did a lot of the work, but we know that your husband also had to be supportive for all the hours you've had to kind of go through. So we understand spouses are also important in this process. So.
One more picture. And then I want just.
I just want to express also my thanks to council for your support and for administration's support. I know that going to trainings is sometimes hard on other employees as they have to fill in as we are gone. But this education I feel is really important, and I feel like benefits Highland City, and of course I feel like it benefits all of us when we know what we're doing in our jobs. So I just really appreciate your support of all continuing education with all staff members. So thank you so much.
Congratulations, Stephanie.
Thank you. I feel like I need extra hands here.
Okay.
Before Senator Kennedy speaks, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I noticed that our chief financial officer is wearing a red shirt. Does that mean there's a problem with the budget? Are you signaling anything?
No, sir.
That's the problem. There's a huge problem with the red shirt. We now
For
see.
the record, when Johnny Harleen caught the miracle pass from John Beck, I did wear my BYU sweatshirt to class that weekend, and it was dangerous at the U. But
I'm
no
still,
correlation.
even though things didn't go well on Saturday, I'm still a true blue cougar. I just want to.
Yes, sir.
have
Thank
not- It's the dark side. Okay, we now have our pleasure to have Senator Kennedy, who represents the Highland area as well as others, to be present. So we'd like to invite Senator Kennedy to come up. He's going to kind of give us maybe a little bit of an overview of the legislation that maybe is coming up, and then if we have questions or things we want to ask him, he's kind enough to be here to help us out with that. So.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. It's great to be with you, and I count you as neighbors and friends, and it's a pleasure to work collaboratively. I've been in the legislature now for 8 years, so I'm running for re-election without an opponent, which, as people that run for elections, I think you understand that's a very desirable position to be in. So I'll be here for another 4 years with you, if you're still here, or with your replacements if you choose to move on. So I represent Highland, Alpine, Cedar Hills, and go down into American Fork as well, and I'm grateful for the invitation to come and spend some time with you. I've been asked to give a legislative update. Right now what's on my mind is mostly social services appropriations, where as a doctor that's where I spend much of my time. Health and Human Services where I spend my policy time. When it comes to health and Medicaid budget, that's the largest component of the state budget. Education coming second. So I've been on both those committees, and they're weighty tasks, try to figure out where we should carefully spend your tax dollars. So I serve in those positions. I'm the chair of Health and Human Services, and in fact, we have an interim meeting tomorrow where I'll be presenting a bill in addition to listening to and voting on other bills. So we're always in a state of action. Hopefully the action is useful action, not disturbing action. But Mayor, we had a conversation this morning, and I'd like to address some of those things. The question of Liberta's lawsuit against Pleasant Grove, which does implicate some of the fees versus taxes that you've levied on your citizens as well. I gathered an update on that lawsuit. It is in the Supreme Court's hands at this point, and at this point nobody knows, as far as I can tell, what the outcome will be. But reportedly, Mayor, just on that issue, is we may have a determination by the end of the year. I think it's an interesting question, because if Pleasant Grove has found that their fee is in fact a tax to build roads, then that may bring in a bunch of other cities that have done the fee versus the tax issue. So Mayor, we'll continue to feed back to you as I hear anything more about that, but I think we're both in the same position where we don't know any more than if you could read the mind of the Supreme Court justices. So, although I have a part to play in confirming them, so it's when they come around, I guess I'll make sure that that's part of my considerations. In addition to that, land use and the city's right versus the state's right to dictate to you versus you do as you see fit, I think is a really important thing. I've talked to you and previous city councils before about the importance of appropriate state oversight of their constituents, which would include the state made the cities and the counties. In addition, the state made the federal government, and now the federal government, as Big Daddy in the room, kind of runs the state on multiple levels, and I find that to be very disturbing, and I find it also to be disturbing that Salt Lake, in the form of the legislature, will come to you and tell you how to run your land use, tell you what to do with water, etc. So I'll just say generally, Mayor, after our conversation, I'm deeply invested in the policy of you making determinations as to whether you want billboards or not, or whether you want high density or low density housing. And I'll invite all of you on the city council as well as the mayor to feed back to me the various concerns and considerations you have about the bills. I believe I've expressed to all of you, and I'll say it again to you and any member of the public that'll listen, is I can't with one person's head do all the analysis that I need to do. I read every bill that I vote on. At the same point, when we pass over 1,000 bills each session. It's a 45-day session, and if you go through the working days, it's 32 days of working that we have, and there are multiple bills that never make it out of committee that I'm also having to review. And my piece of the world tends to be in the healthcare arena because of where I sit. I'm on judiciary as well, so I do have a role to play for our judges and their appointments and considerations. But But if you are willing to have a look at those bills and pass on to me the thoughts and concerns that you might have, I'm deeply interested in that. If you can't or won't, I understand. I've done this for 8 years, and you have things to do, and you send me there to do a task. But more eyes on these bills, the better outcomes I think we're going to get. And I've had that with billboards and water use and land use planning, and I welcome it to continue. So if you don't have my cell number on your phone, I'd like you to have it, and that's does anybody need that? I think you already have it. I know Dr. Smith, my partner, has it, but Sarah. So it's 385-268-9458. 385-268-9458. 9458. And that's Mike Kennedy, just in case you forgot who I am. But yeah, so I'm open to any questions you might have.
I'll start off if that's okay. Senator Kennedy, I didn't realize you were on the Judiciary Committee. One thing that I've been talking with our Justice Court judge about is the recommendation to add this division court level and to get rid of a lot of what justice courts do, and I'd be interested in your opinion there.
I haven't, is that a bill coming through at this point?
It's not a bill. My understanding it's a recommendation from the AOC that they're looking to still get feedback on, but I don't think the bill has been drafted yet.
I don't have an opinion because I haven't seen the policy yet, but so as we get draft language, if we get draft language, then I'd be really interested in your opinion. So what you're hearing on the policy level is that they're eliminating a component of our justice
Essentially
system?
making it so that the only thing that justice courts handle are infractions. Anything above that would go to division or district court. In talking with our justice court, our judge, the concern is the justice court it's a service for the people, right? It's nice that they can come here and not have to go to a higher level of court, travel somewhere. And at justice court, you get to know the community. So it is a service, certainly, and we hate to see while I think the intention behind was to elevate the level of justice courts and make sure that things are more uniform there, I think there's a better way to do that.
Excellent. Well, let's keep the conversation going. And Aaron, I think we met for the first time this morning. I don't think I've met you before, but please give me your feedback, as there's lots of talk and very seldom does the talk actually materialize in legislation. So if that is coming along, I'll certainly pay attention to that. And thanks for your consideration there.
Thank you.
Good question. Others?
So I'd like to, you touched on land use. As a member of the council, we do survey after survey in Highland, and the majority of our citizens would like to keep lower density. But yet we keep getting mandates and bills. Recent one, I think Senator Andrew was involved with it, where we need to have, quote, more moderate housing. We've got to come up with a plan. And that's oftentimes code name for high density.
Right.
And we feel like, you know, with the Boyer project south of the high school and here in the town center, that we've met a lot of the percentage of higher density, but we still get kind of that pressure. And I suspect some of it's from pressure and lobbying by the developers at state level. And the problem with high density is it brings a lot of other issues that a city has to resolve. Congestion and traffic and schools and utilities and things. And, you know, I would just kind of ask if you would support us to get the legislator to back off. Because
Absolutely.
there's, in the north end of the county, there's plenty of high density and lower income housing, and I'm not sure every city has to be full of that, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
And it's because it really puts pressure in so many areas on the city council, and we're kind of, you know, it's in a tough spot. So that's just kind of my personal opinion.
Thanks, very sensitive to that, and I'll welcome your input. Any proposals we are sensitive to as a state, the fact that there are people that are claiming they can't find housing, and I know that that's true in some places, but I look around this building and I look at what has been done at the developmental center property, and we've done our share in the north part of Utah County. I know developers want more, but you're right, Scott. Actually, one of the things that I struggle with is, who do we hear from all the time? The moneyed interests that can hire lobbyists that come and pester and poke and prod the legislature into certain policy considerations, and who's not represented the people. Who is supposed to represent the people? Me and my legislative colleague, Brady Brammer. So I'll stand with you. I just need to know what concerns you might have. What I do see with water and land use is inducements. So if we have a bucket of money, and we say, if you want to, we were just talking about this today with another interim meeting, is if you want, as an agricultural farmer circumstance, we'll pay 50%, you pay 50% for more water efficient irrigation, yeah, if you don't want it, just don't do it. Either you continue to waste your water, or you can tap into this bucket of money. We'll support you in actually getting more water efficient irrigation. So inducements without mandates, that's an approach that I can tolerate, but mandates I'm not a fan of.
No, and I appreciate, as Scott brought it up, we talked a little bit this morning about the concern that, here over at the Boyer property, we have 7 units an acre. There's some that are higher density, up to 10, but we try to help, and that was, where the state was pushing for some density, so we went and did it. It's like you're going, okay, we've tried to work there, but we keep getting the push, and I'm going,
Right.
okay, we don't get the benefit. We did, 689 homes there. We would have been better just to have went and done a 50-unit, really condensed, and then next year done a 50, because it appears you do it once, and you go, well, hold it. We listen. We understand that there's some concerns out there, so we've tried to address, just like we have around the town center. We're, and we mentioned earlier today, was that I believe there needs to be multiple different type of housing. There needs to be the high density, but there's also some that would like to have a little more elbow room and not be in high density. And I think we need to make sure we're sensitive to all the different type. The other concern is where, as bills come about, is maybe as they look at, they're trying to push high density. Some communities, I remember seeing something, and I mentioned today, that we're having about in Highland, about 20% ADUs, if it be in a basement or something, where a lot of other communities might not have that height
Right.
of ADU. And I go, you got to help count some of that with what we're also seeing.
Excellent. Thanks. Those are great considerations, and I'm open to your feedback anytime. Please let me know.
So, quick question. I understand, is this true that the state legislature, the state budget has $1 billion surplus this year?
Yeah, a lot of the ZARPA funds with federal connections and
Red tape?
yes, associated with how that money's used, but there is a surplus. And I think we all know in our positions, they're different, but that's not going to stay that way. We're flattening out, and we're likely to go down. The state actually does a really good job with the rainy day funds. Although the other thing, Scott, for me is I don't want too many of my taxpayer dollars in the pocket of any government entity. And so there's a certain amount of use it, and if you don't need it, send it back to the taxpayers, but we need to be ready for the bad times, which certainly feel like they're on the way if they're not already there.
Other questions? Somebody have?
Just going back, because we have our open space fee, public safety fee, road fee, and you touched a little bit about the PG lawsuit that's happening. Is there anything that we should be on the lookout for as a city when it comes to those fees? Should we be working on doing a different financial infrastructure?
Great point. Thank you, Kim. And part of the point behind my understanding about that is if you're paying an electric fee, then you get a product for a certain price, and those two match. When you're buying a piece of road with a fee, that doesn't make any sense, because if you have a house with 8 people driving around just because they have 8 cars, and then grandma who doesn't even have a car, and they're all paying, which is what Pleasant Grove did, a fee on their electric bill, and grandma's not even using the roads, it's buying a movie ticket and not ever being able to go in and see the movie. So if there are frameworks that you as a city have, you may want to look at those. Now, maybe the Supreme Court will come down in Pleasant Grove's favor, although based on what I understand about their arguments and considerations, they see this like a tax, not like a fee. So if anything could fit into that, which whatever that means, none of us are Supreme Court justices, who knows what they're going to say. But if you have a justification for that fee that matches up with some service that's provided, you should be fine. But if it doesn't, then, and it sounds like Provo had a fee for roads, and then it also, in this case, Pleasant Grove had a fee, but Pleasant Grove had a more complicated algorithm or formula for the assessment of that fee that may be linkable, and they're not subject to the lawsuit, but it could be linked to the use of the road. So yeah, I think it's worth scrutinizing. And frankly, for us, if we're going to levy fees, taxes, if we're going to take money from people, I'm a big fan of truth and taxation hearings. Look, it hurts. I know this city has fought to fix the roads. Pleasant Grove's roads are the worst in our county, still. So they need to do something about that. But of course, they have a beautiful recreation center. That's a different conversation point. But if the fee is levied in the form of an item that you are actually paying for, you should be fine. So I would have a look at those, though, because there's a chance that you're next if there's, if the Supreme Court goes as it may.
Are there any bills being introduced that are going to tackle that, or is it just up to the
Not that I
Supreme
know
Court?
of. It is a piece of the legislative world that I don't dig deep on. Of course, I have to vote on these at some point, but I'm not aware of anybody working on a clarification that way. I think with the lawsuit, there may be a certain amount of, well, we'll just wait and see what they do, but theoretically we could step in. Thanks for that question.
Anything else?
Now, I'm sure as we get closer to January,
Be in touch.
we'll start to have a lot of questions.
Let's, yeah, we could have a legislative preview. Brady Brammer's an outstanding representative, and to have us both here to talk about our views of the legislature. We do see things from different perspectives, but anytime you want me here, and I'll invite myself here occasionally, but I would love to be a good servant of you. I know you're good servants of our people, and let's work together.
No, and I appreciate, you've always been, responsive. If it be with the youth council you saw tonight.
Youth council's great. I love those kids.
We did some activities there. I appreciate your responsiveness there. You've always been very responsive, so I appreciate it. And we'll plan on reaching back out, especially as the legislature gets going, because that's when we'll start to see all the bills kind of raise up, and we'll start getting a little more educated in what's going on.
Hopefully we'll see at the ULCT, League of Cities and Towns lunch that they have. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to be with you and also with those young people. So thanks for your service. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next presentation, the Planning Commission has been spending a lot of time on just discussing on some things, maybe of a code amendment that they would maybe like to discuss. And so tonight we have a member of our Planning Commission, Chris Howden. They come and present to us about regarding xeriscaping in our park strips. So Chris, if you are here, if you wouldn't mind coming up and maybe share what the discussion's been with the Planning Commission and what the thought is in changing the code.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Howden, and if I could just amend it, we haven't spent a lot of time. So it's been over a year and a half, but as you know, getting things on an agenda takes a month or some days to happen, until some of us on the Planning Commission realized if two of us just gang together, we could just say this is going to go on the agenda whether you like it or not, regardless of what our former city administrator thought about things. So in terms of what we're going to present this evening to you folks, it's really not something that the Planning Commission has already formally said we are proposing this. It's just something that we've discussed, and different people on the Planning Commission have got different ideas about it, but I think it would be a fair representation, and Audrey, correct me, Audrey's also here in the audience. It would be a fair representation to say everybody, at least on the Planning Commission, that has participated in these discussions is in favor of doing something. The devil is always in the details of what's being presented or being decided. And so what we would like to present to the City Council to consider would be, you can all read, so I'm not going to read it for you, but just in summary, currently on our park strips and in any sort of parkway detail, so that would just be property running along the side of the road. It's got nothing to do with anything on the homeowner's side of the fence. So this is just specific to the park strips, planters, or parkway details. We currently allow it to be optional, either grass or xeriscaping. And prior to this, a few years ago, it was mandatory that it was grass. And so we've taken a little baby step in the direction of conserving water. And what we would like to propose, just for discussion, is that it's not an option, that we just remove the ability for parkway, detail, planter strips or park strips to be grass, but that we live in a desert.
So let me clarify that. Is that all new park strips, or are you suggesting that we tear everything out and put in xeriscaping?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
Just if it's a new approved.
A new approved
Now, is
area.
it subdivision or is it new approved housing plan you're recommending?
Everything. So in all zones, everywhere in the city, any new development. And
New development.
yeah, new development, because it's not practical. I mean, it would be lovely if you could snap your fingers and do that, but you can't go to outside of Macy's and rip all of that up. We don't have the funding to do that. There are those flip the strip, as you folks are aware of, but they come with a ball and a chain, and you have to use certain types of rocks and things. And so we are not being terribly prescriptive in what we're proposing, but just the concept or the idea of it. I had an interesting discussion with the Boyer chap, and I can't remember his name, I apologize.
Spencer Moffat.
That's right, Spencer. And after he came to Planning Commission, I pulled him to one side and said, how would you feel about something like this? And he said, man, we would have loved that, but we already decided and the horses left the barn. So it was interesting to get a developer's perspective on that they at least were quite impartial and didn't really seem to care, and felt like sprinklers were a bit of a pain to go and put in these little planter strips. So that's the summary. If you want to ask questions, fire away.
So let me ask you, on Flip the Strip, they have, a specific criteria that they're saying, hey, if you're going to flip your strip, and what they're just flipping the strip means you have an existing grass strip that is between the sidewalk and the road, that if we go in and flip that, they have a specific criteria on the percentage that needs to be, I believe, plants. They want a drip system. They want to have, if it be rock or bark, so that the soil also keeps wet in that area. Would you be thinking, as we look at the proposal on that we'd want to have some type of criteria on, hey, you need to have some type, are you looking, saying, hey, it's okay just to have rocks? Or are you thinking more of following what the guidelines of Flip the Strip, where it needs to be 30% with vegetation or things of that nature?
Oh, thanks, Kelly. So we have a couple of examples, and we actually don't, personally, I have a aversion to being terribly prescriptive, but I think from just a common sense point of view, you probably follow some sort of established guideline where it makes sense, if it's not an onerous burden on people. Because you don't want to have we're going to help you save water, but then you have to put in a drip system, and it's going to cost you a whole lot of extra money. So bear in mind the Flip the Strip thing is for existing infrastructure, and this proposal is not talking about, it's purely prospective, future stuff. But you're quite right, Mayor, that the Flip the Strip has these sort of mandatory things, but they're all pretty sensible, actually, if you read it.
So when the Central Utah Water Project came and talked to us, or a representative, their feeling is that we are not Las Vegas, we are not Arizona, and so there should be a fair percentage, and you're talking about this with Flip the Strip, of greenery, and they recommended having some greenery if they were going to help support it. And I practiced down at American Fork Hospital, and they ripped out everything and put in rock. And some of it looks attractive, some of it looks like heck. So I think you need to kind of follow kind of some common sense. Because I like xeriscaping. I'm restoring my grandparents' home in Pleasant Grove, and I xeriscaped the strip in front. We have grasses and ornamental grasses and rock. But I'm just kind of hoping that it's not going to be just straight rock. See what I mean?
Well, and that would be, so I think what we're trying to say, is the council amenable to looking at having as a requirement that it needs to be xeriscape? So I guess the question, you mentioned you don't want to give too prescriptive. Do we want to say, hey, it would be a requirement that they can't put grass in? Are we willing to go forth and start putting forth a code that way where it'll be no grass, it has to be xeriscaped? Now, as you look at Flip the Strip, it says perennial plants must cover at least 50% of the converted park strip at maturity. So they're getting in that they're saying, hey, trees don't count. There's some things that they're looking for. Are we interested in going down that road of saying, hey, we want to get rid of all the grass in the park strip, or are we wanting to encourage, where's the level at on the council?
Before we ask that too much, can I have Kelly update you guys? So we've been talking with CUWCD to get more clarification about, if you remember, they have that you have to restrict your ordinances, get more water-wise, or your residents won't qualify for flip your strip type programs anymore. So I'm gonna have Kelly update you as to what she's learned from them, and then we'll ask that question as to how you want us to move forward.
Thanks, Aaron. As far as CUWCD, because the last direction that we received from the council was based on CUWCD's letter to table it, but then also ask them as far like where they are at on leniency and where they're willing to give a little. Basically what was explained to me was what they're really looking for is at least the maximum percentage of turf in front and side yards. And so they are wanting regulations regarding the front and side yards, because that's what technically or legally we can regulate. We can't regulate backyards. But to my understanding, both the city council, and we actually brought this to the planning commission during a similar communication item after we spoke with the council, just to make the planning commission aware of where CUWCD was at, because we knew with that they were discussing the xeriscaping options, and they gave similar feedback as far as feeling like these regulations were too strict, but they were still supportive of Commissioner Howden moving forward with some sort of xeriscaping requirements. So that's where we're at as far as that's their primary thing that they're not planning or wanting to budge on. Is it's actually a 35% maximum coverage in that front and side yard area with turf or lawn area. So that's that.
So, but you're talking about front and side yards?
Front and side
not
yards,
particularly
correct.
the park strips, which we're talking
The
about.
one just park
The
strip?
park strips, they would still be required because our typical park strip is 4 feet wide. They say anything that's less than 8 feet wide, no sod. And so that's another thing that they would, it comes with it that we wouldn't be able to have grass in park strips if we adopted their
But you
ordinance.
could, but this is in future things. We don't have to tear all of our park strips
That is
down.
correct. Which that's the issue we ran into, and I expressed this to him, is that as far as front yards, the only thing that we regulate currently in code is that by 1 year after they receive their certificate of occupancy, they have to have at least 70% of their front yard landscaped. And so even then, well, as far as saying that, or regulating 35% maximum lawn area, as far as how we're regulating things now, it wouldn't be possible for us to regulate people's landscaping unless we were asking them for a landscape plan when they're presenting their building permit to us.
Do we know any idea on cost? Is this, if we're saying, hey, this is what it is, does this cost more than grass to put in, or is it very similar in cost? Does anyone?
It's
More,
cheaper.
says
Up
Andy
front.
Spencer.
Less maintenance.
Based on just installation cost only, it is more with the Mountain Ridge Park. We found that we bid it with grass, and then we've since switched to xeriscape, and our change order for the front of Mountain Ridge was on the order of about $100,000 additional to install the xeriscape and go away from the grass.
But once again, you also cut down, am I thinking, Andy, maintenance-wise, that over the years you kind of capture it because you're not mowing as much and things of that nature, or is there still as much maintenance there?
Well, the xeriscape tends to be a little more concentrated maintenance, meaning you maybe don't have the same weekly maintenance that you do with grass, but you still do, when you do maintenance, it can be quite intensive, and what does tend to happen to you with xeriscape is it kind of climbs up on you, it's looking good, and then suddenly it's full of weeds, and when it gets full of weeds, it's pretty significant to get it out. And so xeriscape still does require quite a bit of maintenance. Perhaps it's a little too simplistic, but in my way of thinking, the biggest benefit is the water savings, but relative to maintenance, I think as far as the cost-wise, it's still within a similar ballpark, but probably a little more ebbs and flows than consistent.
So if we have our frontage on it's on R120 frontage, of in our development are 110 feet, and R130 is 130 feet. If we say we have a park strip that's 130 feet, along there, what type of water usage would we have? I mean, would we say that how much would that use, and how much would be saved if we went zero-scaped? Because that's, I mean, what we're really saying, hey, we're trying to save water. How much water are we really saving?
Percentage.
I think your water savings is significant. I don't have gallons for you. I know Central Utah does, and we can get that for you, but it's significant in that most of your xeriscape is targeted watering, right? And you tend to not get the overspray and the water running down the curb. You know, if you look in your neighborhoods, each of your neighborhoods each morning, not tomorrow morning because the water's off, but you know, before then, you know, the gutter has got a little water stream flowing down it for you know 2 or 3 hours there, and that's just water that went onto the concrete and ran off. So the water savings is, you know, can be substantial and is often substantial because you're providing you know, a drip system right to the plant and keeping that water in the soil rather than having it overspray and run off or you know, water a bigger area. So the water savings.
Let me tell you what I've really noticed, because I zero-scaped a lot of my front area, at least. I mean, I still have my grass, but then I've went and put a lot of the planter areas where bark and just these, I can't tell if the plant's getting water. You know, like if it's grass, you can see a dry spot, you know, but if I can't, and I've had some plants die, and I'm in there trying to see if my filter's clogged, because it's a different type of filter. I'm trying to see if the plant is, I have to pull it out and go, I have to find the little drip thing and go, okay, and it is dripping or it's not. I mean, there is a little bit, when you talk about maintenance, you got, you know, I've had some of the little, when you push in the little pipe thing to be able to get the little lead out, I've had some of those come off and I'm going, okay, there is a little maintenance here. It's not.
And that's kind of more of like what I was getting at. Is there's still pretty significant on maintenance. It's just a little more ebbs and flows. But when you get into a maintenance cycle, your grass didn't just go brown. Your plant's crispy by the time you notice it. You're replacing that plant. By the time it actually gets weedy, it's weedy, you know. And so it does have a little more ebb and flow to it. But when it's heavy, it's heavy.
Can I make a couple comments? So I'm very supportive of considering zero-scaping for the park strips. I may not have sounded that, but I am. But I would like to see an option encouraging some greenery. And I have a hard time dictating to people, even though zero-scaping can be very beautiful in front yards and side yards, and I understand what we need to do, but I think it'd be a nightmare if you have small kids to have them go out and play on a bunch of rocks. I mean, it'd be good for my business, but you know, I wouldn't want I think little kids need a green space to play on, and certainly they wouldn't regulate the back. So I'm a little hesitant about the front and side yards, but zero-scaping the strip, like I said, I've done it over in Pleasant Grove in my grandparents' old home, and I think it can be done nicely, but I'm not sure I want to encourage just straight rock. Do you know what I mean? I'd like to see a little bit of variation. Yeah, that's my opinion, personal opinion. So.
You know, Audrey's also on the planning commission. Why don't you come up, Audrey? I think you've had a couple comments you wanted to make, just to make sure. Come up, and if you'll state your name, just so we get on the record, please.
This is Audrey Moore, and I just wanted to make a couple comments, because as a commission, we talked about it while Chris was out of town, a couple of them. So I feel bad, because I didn't know what he knew that we knew, so I just wanted to kind of talk about. What we were kind of talking about is the opportunity that the community knows that the irrigated water is now going to be metered and they're going to be paying. So the timing of this is very good, because it is to the citizens' benefit to, whether we participate in Flip Your Strip or not because of all its regulations, to encourage the community through the newsletter, through whatever, to go, now's the time to prepare and look ahead, because you're about to be metered for the water and you can adjust it. And if we can get the statistics about how much gallons go down the drain, my street's drenched all the time, and you've got every other house watering every other day, so you have all that water going down the drainage. There's a lot of wasted water that we can change. Yes, there's some maintenance, but that's, I mean, depending on where you live, you learn to do the water differently. It's funny, I lived in California. You don't leave the sink on when you brush your teeth, and you turn the shower off when you shampoo. And that's just standard procedure in parts of California. You just know that. And here everyone's like, what? We take 2-hour showers. So, I mean, there's some public education how to do a drip, not, so that it would encourage those to flip their strip and go to drip, okay, it rhymes, regardless of the program, because the inducement that they would save ultimately with their metered water. And we talked very much about encouraging greenery, trees, shade. The rock heats up and actually burns a lot of the plants. So if you are planting trees within that strip with some of the vegetation, and we definitely talked about allowing perennial grasses that stay put in the bunches as some of the greenery. And if you, I think there's another page of these too, you can see some of the other options. There are a lot of creativity involved in what people can do. But just straight rocks, as we've seen in some of the median areas in the street, when you have to spray it with that weed killer and it turns bright orange or yellow and ruins the benefit of the pretty rocks, there is a point where you want to mix mediums, and people will get ideas as they see each other doing it and start looking for these ideas. But the point being, the timing is good because of the metered water. And that would, with a little positive public education and getting excited about, you know, saving water and doing those things in a positive way, this might be something people want to naturally move to anyway.
I love exactly what you're saying. I'm not one to really want to tell people what they can and can't do, but I think when it comes to this, we kept using that word encourage, and I think on our part, we have to be able to encourage and incentivize people to look at this as a more viable solution or option than putting in just grass.
The positive thing, we've got this reservoir here that we can't fill, that we're building because we don't have the water. And we're all experiencing, one day up at Tibble Fork, you can swim, and the other day you're stuck in the mud. I mean, because of the water levels, we just don't have what we have had in the past. And so this is something we can do. And if you approach it from a positive way, you're empowered. These are options, and even give, everyone loves pictures, but picture ideas of
Have you
options.
talked to Brent Wallace? I just was out with Brent Wallace like a couple months ago, and he was talking about this also and flipping the strip and everything, and he actually said it was about 35% water saving just by flipping that strip.
UtahWaterSavers.com says between 5,000 and 8,000 gallons per year that you save by converting to Xeriscape.
Just as an individual?
In the park strip?
Individual homeowner.
A home will save $5,000 to $8,000 per year by flipping your strip.
Not gallons.
Gallons. Thank you.
No,
I wish, right?
We're all done. We're done.
I'd do it.
5,000 to 8,000
You know,
gallons.
and I don't know if the planning commission, the city council's already approved the Mountain Ridge Park to be xeriscaped. Now, when we say it's an extra 100,000, I know Kelly had been working with, how much are we getting Central Utah to help cover back the other way? Do you remember? Or?
I can't remember exact numbers. It's a little over 80,000.
So we are going to try to lead by example there at Mountain Ridge Park, that everything on our front park strips, along our sides, and even on the, if you want to say on the south or any of the places we're going to have a trail around, but everything on the outside will be xeriscapes for what. And we've went and sought grants to help the city on it, because there is a cost associated that's higher than grass. But we recognize we need also lead by example as a city.
And from what we read that was presented, trees totally help with that. Trees help with the heat so that whatever else you're planted is not fried in our summer heat, so.
And I think the spirit, well not I think, the spirit in which the Planning Commission has discussed this is really more along the lines of, we don't really want to create a huge burden in the city where we are having to go and research plants and species of yellow rabbit brush and all that. There are existing people that are specialists in this, and so we would at least encourage, if the city wants to consider it, that we look at just following the lead of like a Central Utah Water Conservancy District and whatever their guidelines are, that the city just sort of steps into line and follows that. And once again, this is we've had kind of a broad discussion, but just to bring it back to square one, what we're proposing for the council to consider potentially is a very narrow, discrete thing, and that is prospective only, so nothing historical, everything else gets grandfathered in, then it's limited just to the planter, park strip detail, going forward for any new construction.
I appreciate. So let's get some feedback, Council. Is this something you would like to see move forward specifically where we would have a requirement for the park strip to be zero-scaped? Where are you at? Are you wanting to go all the way where that any new build would be that way? Is there a different way you'd like to approach it? I'll start with you, Sarah. Maybe you can kind of chime in.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have it go forward to be any new build. I think that that works, and I like other people to be grandfathered in and then encouraged to flip this strip. So yes, I think we should move forward, but I do think we need to encourage plants, not just rock. I do think the rock will heat up and will cause other problems, so I do think there needs to be some foliage.
Okay. Scott?
I've already said what I think, but I agree with Sarah. She said it very well.
And I'm going to chime in. I actually agree with Sarah and with Scott on this. The only concern I would have is if it's all rock. I had a neighbor that had all rock there, and it was all one color, and the kids did go, and they were chucking the rocks around, out there. And he flipped the strip the other way. He pulled all those rocks and went out, because he says, I didn't understand it was going to look that way, and he went and put back in grass. And so I think we've got to, I think what you were saying, Sarah, make sure we have some standards to help them make it beautiful. If not, you will see people later on, if we have a real wet year, maybe flip the other way.
So could we make like a video or a presentation of some of these examples just to show people this is what we're thinking about?
Yeah, Flip the Strip actually has a really good video about people who wanted to do it. And it actually talks about, it's not as easy. You got to get a plan. You've got to plan it out. You just don't go rip the grass at it. I actually enjoyed the little commercial video. It was about 2.5 minutes. I thought, you kind of gave a pretty good description about making sure you want plants so it's not hot. And so I think that, but I think Scott, you're saying maybe we have some visuals to help guide.
Visuals, yes.
And I think a guideline, maybe we do want to have a certain percentage with some type of plantage. Anyway, what are you feeling there, Kim?
I definitely want to make sure that our city is going that route of waterways, conserving water. It's just where we're heading in the direction. I do have concern with telling people, regulating what people can put in a park strip, what they can't. Because I do see your concern, somebody with young kids, they don't want something with rocks or bark chips or anything like that. So taking away that decision from them of what they can and can't put in there. But I think there could be a good compromise. And I still like that word encourage, where there could be incentives to basically make this the choice that they would want to go to. I'd have to think about what could be incentives and what could be those encouraging policies put into place for that.
You can even look on Pinterest and YouTube. Park strip ideas. It is a national sort of movement that they're doing now with severe droughts all over. So there's a lot. So even if that was put in like the newsletter, for good ideas, look at YouTube,
I love it. You're speaking my terms here. I'd Pinterest that.
Yeah, Pinterest that.
Okay, Tim, what's your feeling on this? Brittany, get ready. Hopefully you're still on the line.
I like the compromise of not requiring retrofitting and then just going forward. I think that's great. The concept is great. We see what's happening with water all over the state. I agree with Kim. I don't like the idea of mandating. However, limiting it to park strips is great. Emphasizing plants, I think Sarah said that, that's great. I don't want to go the route, as someone has said, of Arizona, New Mexico, where you have like the fake steer skull in the rocks and maybe a tombstone or something. I want to avoid that, obviously, but I really like the concepts. I like the direction. And I completely support it.
Are you supportive of the park strip?
I'm supportive of park strips and medians as opposed to mandating it for residential homes, but just the park strips. I think it's...
So you're okay having any new park strip be required to have zero scape?
I am okay with it. I just I agree with Sarah and Scott. I wanted to emphasize plants native plants as opposed to emphasizing rocks. So,
Brittany, are you still on the line? Councilmember Bills? Give her a minute to see if she can unmute. And Brittany, are you there? At this time, it appears we do not have Councilmember Bills with us.
She shows on here, but we can
She had to
text
run
her.
and do one little thing to come back, so. Okay.
Okay.
Brittany, have you been able to hear the conversation that's been going on about the Xeriscape and park scripts? Are you available to be able to chime in on that? Are you at the beach?
She better be.
She just got back from Belize.
Is she back then, or is she just coming
She's
back?
back.
Okay. Is she able to, Brittany, did you want to say anything, or are we okay to move on?
Yeah, she said, I agree, nothing to add.
Okay.
Also, text Sullivan.
May I have permission just to ask?
She's breaking in.
It's just cutting in and out, yeah.
Sorry, Brittany, you're cutting in and out. We can't hear what you're saying. Anyway, we appreciate, Chris, is there one last word or something you want to share?
Actually, it's just more of a question just for clarification for future considerations, and it's a legal specific question. For the parkway detail and the park strips and planters only, is there any legal inhibition in us making a mandate if there were sort of PUDs or other organizations in the city that mandate grass, for example?
What he's saying, if you have an HOA that says that they have to plant grass in that front park strip, but the city code, it conflicts with the city code.
So because that's all still owned by the city, our regulations trump as to park strips and those types of things.
Okay. Does staff have any questions from staff on this to understand how to move forward?
So Kelly will work on drafting an ordinance that requires new park strips in new developments to be xeriscape with plant material to a certain percentage, and she'll bring that back for, would that go to Planning Commission first, and then City Council?
Okay. Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. With that, we'll now move on to our consent items. We need to pull on the consent item number B, which is our city administrator contract. At that time, it has not been finalized with all eyes to be able to see the contract, to be able to vote on it. But we would like to announce tonight that we have chosen a city administrator, being Erin Wells. We see her up here, so we are excited to have her be the new city administrator. We are in negotiations at the final stages of that contract. We believe we were close enough to be able to make that announcement. Is that anything you'd like to say, Erin?
I should have thought of that. No, this has been a 3-month-long job interview, and I'm excited to be moving forward, Mayor and Council. Really excited to keep work with you and getting to keep work with my awesome staff. So
I think you should stand up and take a bow.
for our very large audience.
Mr. Mayor, is it okay to clap?
I think it's
against policy.
Yay! We anticipate at the next city council will have this contract. So we were just finalizing with Rob, just got back the draft today. I'll get that, just gonna make sure Aaron's kind of seeing it, then we'll circulate it with council. We were just a couple of days off because of the fall break. We were just waiting for some final information to come back from council, so I've pulled consent item number 3B.
And I'd like to pull 3C.
And 3C. Is there a motion for 3A?
I'll make a motion to approve consent item 3A, approval of meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Kim, second by Sarah on item 3A. Brittany, are you able to log in and vote?
She texted saying she can see the slides, so I
don't know, I can't comment.
We'll see. She said she can.
So Brittany, we cannot see that you have voted yet. Would you like to could you vocally vote? Oh, she has in. Let's see what it says. That passes 5-0. Scott, you'd like to pull item number 5 or 3C. Is there?
Okay, I just, as a whole, I support not having to send the whole encroachment policy to people when we notify them. I don't have any problem with that. As I read through this, though, and looked at the letter that we're sending out, I appreciate all the work in it, but I kind of sat back and I thought, you know, I've talked about open space issues for 13 years. I've been on the council. If I got this letter, I would be just a little confused. And so I just wanted to clarify a couple things. And I just want to make a general thing. So we, you know, after we passed this encroachment policy, I believe in July, if I remember correctly, then I think you came back in, the staff came back in August sometime and kind of gave us several different areas in the city, and we decided to do Highland Hollows, am I saying that right? Which I think is fine. However, I would like to request as a council member, and I don't know what the other council thinks, but I think before the letters go out, it would be nice in maybe the business section at the end of city council, if we just looked at a map of that neighborhood again and just refresh our memories so we know what areas are encroached on, so that when people start calling us, we can kind of be better informed. I just appreciate that information before. The other thing is I've been kind of an advocate of keeping maintenance agreements where they're appropriate available to people. And I was a little confused in the letter here, and I think this letter is probably specifically just for this homeowner.
Yeah, so this letter went out to 10 homes in the Highland Hollows subdivision.
The letter that's attached, we had only written the Highland Hollows letters, and so I quickly just took a few things out that were specific to Highland Hollows that I thought could relate to other subdivisions. So once we get to other subdivisions and we do a further review, there will be some things that will change.
Okay, so I haven't been able to ask the question because where I was kind of concerned. So I guess in the encroachment policy, and we've discussed this a lot, but have we, and we'll do different neighborhoods, so are we totally eliminating any ability to ever purchase property? I thought there were still some neighborhoods that we could.
So and actually in Highland Hollows, there might even be some areas. And so this was, and I thought we showed the map of the 10 homes back in August, because it was only the ones that had the conservation easement on them. So we've only, when you say we've only sent out the 10 notices, only those that are backing like the little creek and have the conservation easement. But Scott, you're right. There might be, as we come up and see some other parcels, we might say, hey, is it available for maintenance agreement? 2, is it something we don't want to keep anymore, but would be more specific? Because there were 2 properties that came up in the Highland Hollows that I've driven by and going, okay, now we have to, I don't know about easements. I mean, some of it we have to go, okay, is there water lines there, easements? But there are 2 parcels that we felt, I noticed encroached. There was that little V shape, if you remember, but we're going, those would probably be sellable versus what's going on. So yes, it will bring up.
What I'm just saying is maybe a week or 2 before we send them out, just as a council, look at it.
That's the plan.
And just have a little bit of input, because I appreciate all the work on the staff. I think the letter is well done, but I just want to read the paragraph that I thought was confusing.
The video.
Okay, that's better than script or flip. But anyhow, okay. So in this paragraph here, I'm just curious, and I know this is for this specific home, but it says, under Highland City's encroachment policy, a copy of which is included, which we're not going to do, we're going to summarize it.
Or we'll give a link to it.
Or you link to it. Well, aren't you going to summarize it a little bit too, or just a little bit?
No.
Okay,
go ahead.
You have 2 or 3 options for resolving the encroachment. The option for a maintenance agreement is not an option since the area encroached upon is wetlands, understand that. And a conservation area, understand that, because that's what happened here. But it says city open space. And then in the next sentence, it says you have you can do one of the following options, and number one is provide a copy of your maintenance agreement. So I thought it was just a little bit confusing if I got that letter.
I
Because we just said
understand
you
why it
can't
could be
have a maintenance
confusing.
agreement, bring it in.
Yeah, but they might have had a
purpose,
past one.
the purpose of that was just in case for some reason the city wasn't able to, in the past, keep the records that we're supposed to keep.
Sure.
That possibly a resident has a copy of a city-signed maintenance agreement, that we would have that taken care of. We can eliminate it, and if they just happen to have one, I'm sure they would raise that issue.
But again, you know, this is where I kind of like to have a little discussion on the neighborhoods ahead of time, because a maintenance agreement may make sense, and the people may have had one and may have, you know, put some kind of nice landscaping for a small area. For example, I always like to bring up Caddy Lane Trail. The last council, the gentleman that we approved the netting finished his landscaping, and to make everybody happy, there's a lot of xeriscaping in it, but he landscaped right up to the trail. And so it beautified the trail, but whether he has a maintenance agreement, I don't know. But at the same time, there's a lot of homes along there, and I don't want to be accountable to tell all those people to rip out their landscaping. So what I'm concerned about is if they have a maintenance agreement, can we kind of work with it a little bit, or are we just going to say, no, you got to put it all in native vegetation?
We will be talking a little bit more about this during a communication item at the end of the meeting, and I'll give more details as far as existing maintenance agreement and what we as staff were planning for future maintenance agreements. But Councilmember Smith, the intent of this, we are full well intending on bringing each subdivision back to the council for y'all to discuss which areas are we comfortable with selling, which areas need to simply remove encroachment, and which areas are we okay with doing maintenance agreements. These letters, the reason why they went out to Highland Hollows is because the council expressed to staff that this is an area we don't want to sell, shouldn't be eligible for maintenance agreements, and so it's seen as this is an easy one for us. We already know exactly what we want to do, move forward with this one. The other ones, the council will need to sit down and review, again, those three options, and the goal is to, when we send these letters out, that we already know what the council wants to do.
Well, I must have been sleeping, because I remember choosing Highland Halls. I don't remember deciding that no maintenance agreements.
Well, the reason why.
Conservation.
Because
easement.
I call it
Conservation.
because it's low-lying fruit, our hands were tied because it was conservation. It was an easy decision because we can't make the deal. But however, one of the concerns that I've come across, and I'm sure some of us, when I've talked with some residents, they've said, well, I have a maintenance agreement that was for life. and we all go, oh, yeah, you sure? Well, we have come across that there's 3 different type of maintenance agreements.
Four now.
So we're finding that what we thought was maybe, there are others. And I'm not going to second guess a resident that says they have something, because I don't know if they don't.
I know.
So,
well, the one I was involved with was for 10 years, and then it would renew. But some of the people that had the 10-year ones are coming in saying they renew every 2 years. So it's crazy.
I'll give you more updates on this at the end of the meeting.
But we're just trying to be sensitive that if they have it, that's an option. They can come and say, hey, I have a maintenance agreement with the council, and we were not aware of it. Because like Kelly says, every time we turn around, we're finding another version of a maintenance agreement that was done, and we didn't know about it. So we're just trying to be sensitive. They could have had something.
I know, and I appreciate that. When I read that, I just got confused.
No, and I think it's good, because you're going, we're saying you can't, but if you have one, is there other questions?
Can't do one, but if you have one. No, that was kind of I didn't understand that if you can't have one, but if you got one, bring it in.
So Kelly, they have the 30 days to just take care of this on their own, and then after 30 days, what are we doing?
I'm sorry, that's another thing that I'll address in the communication.
Why don't we just jump in?
Do you want to jump to it?
There's nobody here for number 4 anyway, so go ahead.
We're already there. Let's discuss it all, because we only have one item really after, after this.
I guess, Mayor and Council, are you ready to make a vote on just that one policy change, or do you want to have Kelly talk about the rest of encroachment stuff we were going to do?
Do you want to do the vote, or do you want to have the discussion and then come back to the vote?
I'm ready to vote, just because the policy change is just not requiring them to mail the whole entire policy, but just include a link or.
Now, and the reason is, when I got the paper, you have the 2 pages.
Yeah.
And it's like you have the other 4, and I'm going, I think I'd be so confused.
I'd be so confused.
What I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
and was just trying to say, okay, this will link back to what that means, what's going on for things to help them on the encroachment policy, but not to try to confuse them so much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just was confused a little bit on the letter.
Let's
Yeah.
vote on that, and then let's go into the discussion.
Okay, is there a motion then? Or is there further discussion before we have a motion? Now, Robert's rules, just if you want, in Robert's Rules of Order, you're supposed to actually have a motion and then you do a discussion. Just, if you're just wondering, we've not really followed that. We've usually had our discussion.
I really like that.
Then but we've had, that's why sometimes when I ask if there's other questions. Anyway, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that the city council approve consent item 3C, action amendment of encroachment policy, general city management.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Kim, second by Tim. Is there further discussion that needs to be had?
Is that off?
I was just gonna say, this is gonna have to be a voice vote on this one because
Okay. I have a motion by Kim, second by Tim. Any further discussion before we go to vote?
I guess my discussion, I just want to say that I'm in agreement with Councilwoman Rodella. I think we should mark that in the minutes.
That noted, that Councilmember
note
Scott
that.
Smith is in agreement with Councilmember
It's been
Riddell.
happening quite a lot
I think that will happen
recently,
by the way he
Scott.
votes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Is Brittany on the line? Can she vote? I'm gonna ask her to vote first.
What's your vote?
Yeah, what is your vote, Brittany? Can you say yes or no for the motion?
Is it lagging?
It sounds like she's listening to YouTube as her audio source.
Oh, yes, she said yes.
Can we, Rob, can we take a text message as a yes from another council member?
Should I show that
It's
to
supposed
you?
to be a voice vote, so.
Sorry.
So
Sorry,
I-
Brittany.
okay,
There it
we
was,
just-
there it was.
There was a vocal yes by council
So
member.
with our new equipment, is this going to be better in the future?
Yes, this is something that will be improved on that.
Okay, so we have now, council member Bills as we have now heard a verbal yes. Council member Ball. Council member Rodella.
Yes.
Council member Smith.
Yes.
Council member Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, that passes 5-0. We will now, let's go ahead and go into the discussion item. We are now not going to do item number 4. We're going to jump to item number 5A as communication item.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I'll try to be brief, but this was kind of giving you all an update as to what we've done so far with Highland Hollows. As y'all know, we sent out the encroachment letters on September 29th. There were 9 letters sent along Dry Creek. There was one resident that did not encroach, and so we didn't have to send them a letter. Basically, part of this letter, after looking further into the plat, I know we had quick discussions on this, but in the subdivision plat, there are conservation easements inside the private property. Part of the letter, we informed them of that easement, but we are not enforcing on the private property, but it was just an education being like, this is an easement that's in your property, but we're asking you to address the encroachment on actual city property. We also, as you can note in the letter, in the other staff report that was provided, I met with both Andy and our park superintendent, Josh Castleberry, to discuss the remediation plan, because we thought it best to provide as much detail as possible as far as what we're actually expecting from residents. And so we outlined specific trees, shrubs, and seeds, and also gave some references as to who they could possibly purchase them from or who offers them, trying to make it as detailed and easy for the resident as possible. In that letter, residents were given 30 days to respond, and that date is October 29th. So far, technically, we've had communication with 3 residents. Andy and Josh went out on site last week to meet with 2 of the residents, discussing different issues and how they were to address removing the encroachment. This is just to show you where they're at. These two stars are the 2 residents that they met with on site. And then this is a resident that Andy has worked with in the past to remove their encroachment as quickly as they could. This was a few months ago.
So the encroachment's all behind their property line then?
Yes.
Okay.
We wanted to go over some lessons learned and just the few conversations that we've had with residents. Obviously, things aren't as simple as they are on paper when you go out on site. One thing, a realization is that the replacement of these grasses, shrubs, and trees, like that remediation to where we're wanting it to be, will take several years to actually be established. And the other issue that came up is the fact that that growth will need a water source if it's meant to be established in the way that we want it to be. Technically, there are two primary options. One is because in part of our policy, we recognized that sprinklers were an encroachment. And so part of that was, hey, remove your sprinklers. And so one option is remove their sprinklers and have them plant the seed. And typically, just in talking with Josh, it would probably take about approximately 4 years for that seed to establish and grow. Or option two, which as staff, this is our preferred option, is to allow the resident to keep the sprinklers in there until the seed is established, which Josh said with these certain types of seeds would take approximately 1 year, which falls in line with the timeline that we've outlined in the policy. And then we, or as staff, would go and follow up, check the seeding, make sure it's established, and the goal would be to cut and cap the lines. So it wouldn't be removing the sprinklers over again and possibly ruining what was just established. We'd just leave it there, but make sure there was no water access to the sprinklers that are in the ground. Another lesson learned, we are, as staff, trying to be sensitive to the financial burden this is to remove encroachments, and that's one of the reasons, well, a couple conversations they had out on site was trying to come up with a way to reach our goals without, well, making residents spend a substantial amount of money to remove a 1/4 acre of grass, you know. And so we're trying to do this based on like a situation or basis, but make sure that we're still following the policy and doing ultimately what our goal is. Another question or concern that we had was as far as there are some improvements that large equipment would be needed to remove some of these improvements. And so there was question as to, okay, are we going to require them to go in on their private property with this equipment, whether they're tractors or hoes or whatever they are, on their property to remove what's on the city property, or are we going to let them access from the city property to remove these encroachments? There was an idea that we discussed as far as a possible trail option where we kind of come up with, here's your main route from, this is specific to Highland Hollows, by the way. Here's your main route from city property to get to the back of y'all's properties. And I'll show you that on the, actually, okay, I'll just show you right here. It could be around here. We'd have to look into it. We could possibly get a little dirt trail out of it if they're driving their tractors all in the same spot over and over again. And then another question or something that we're looking into as far as ultimately the goal with this is residents have taken public property and made it appear like private property. And so residents don't feel welcome to be on the property because they're private improvements. And so as far as removing all improvements, you tend to, once you go out on site, there are a couple of trees that were put in or a couple of plants or shrubs or things that technically are private improvements, but honestly could be a benefit to the city. And so we're trying to make little decisions like that as we go out on site as to what truly benefits the city on the city property. As far as next steps, like I said, we've had communication with 3 out of those 9 residents, and I anticipate that we're not going to get the other 6 to reach out to us within the next week, 2 weeks or so. And after that date, our plan as staff is to send 1 additional letter as a follow-up letter saying, hey, on this date, we sent you this letter with this information. Please reach out to us. And then if we still do not get any communication, we are planning on knocking doors. And so ultimately in sharing this with you, if the council has any concerns or questions, feel free to give your input.
So one thing I have, and I apologize, I guess I never anticipated, and I guess we do talk about restoration. But just look, let's assume they've planted grass back there.
Yes.
If we just say quit watering it, and because the city owns the property, we could say we'd like you to cap the sprinklers, but if they don't, we own the property, we could go cap their sprinklers. But I guess I never anticipated we're gonna have them ripping the grass out and doing all that. I mean, one option is to say, don't water, don't improve anymore. If you have trampolines or things that way, they need to take them out. And I guess maybe that was kind of what my thought was when we were gonna send the letters, but maybe we've said they have to restore, and so they're thinking, I've got to go plant all these trees and.
This one specifically, just because it's that Dry Creek Conservation Area, on the plat, there were specific notes saying not to remove trees. A majority of these encroachments involved a lot of removing trees and native plants. And so this one was unique, where we're wanting them to bring the property but as close as we can to what originally was supposed to be by the creek, to, well, honestly, to keep more of a native buffer area from the creek. But
Can I ask
that's my
a quick,
thought.
this example you have, because I haven't walked this area for a little while, but this example you have in the instruction material for the council, this house, there's permanent structures on their private property, right? On this map, I'm looking at it. Oh, is that Twin Bridges?
Yeah,
okay.
there are areas that there are permanent structures.
Yeah, because I couldn't see it on the big one.
But in this case, we've met with 3 homeowners, one of which we talked to last fall, when it looked like, there was a policy coming, and they had cleared the land, but they hadn't yet put in their sprinkler system or anything, and we talked to them and said, hey, you might want to save yourself some money, maybe push the brakes for a minute while we see, what the policies are going to be. Another homeowner, pretty well it's just grass that they put in, grass and sprinklers. And I'm just speaking to the city portions, right? Not really speaking to the conservation areas within their own lots. Another homeowner had placed a fire pit with some kind of flagstones around the fire pit. They had done a lot of good things to the stream in that they'd armored the stream so it couldn't erode. But as part of that, they had placed a staircase down to the stream out of large stones, like very large stones. Each stone is about the size of the top of the podium there. And so in order to remove or modify that, that's where you're looking at large equipment, to be able to modify those type of stones if you're going to get down in there. A lot of the other homeowners have done various forms of retaining walls and other things in these backyards, to where if we're truly looking to remove it or have it have the appearance of public property, it will take some equipment and some expense to remove or restore. And so that is part of the hard part when you get out there and you're meeting with someone in their actual yard and they're saying, well, okay, do I have to take out that? Can I leave this? Do I have to take out that? Can I leave this? The folks that we met with were very friendly and quite willing to be proactive, as you would expect, because they're the ones that reached out to us first and said, okay, let's visit.
Right.
But even then, there's still some considerations as to, boy, this is not as easy as just,
Sure.
say, well, turn it back to native. There's a lot of work that went into getting it to where it is.
So let me ask your opinion. I mean, we want things restored pretty much, and I think the mayor's given one option, like if it's grass, just let it go natural, like it would, maybe put a few of the native trees back in. But do you need to pull out the steps down to the creek? Do you really need to pull out the retaining wall? Because that doesn't...
So here's the, because when we met with the residents, again, we're, the one that we stopped from planting anything, let's just kind of set them off to the side. They're in a different category, right? But these are 2 that have kind of had, their yards established for a number of years now. And what we said and what we intended when we wrote the letter is, look, we're not trying to give an exact formula that, okay, we want 7, I'll give you an example. We want 7 at Gamble Oak, and we want, so much seeding, and we want this many sagebrush planted. We're not coming to the residents with a recipe that says, this is exactly what we want. What we're going to them is saying, look, these improvements that have been placed give a very distinct appearance that this is your yard. And the goal coming out of this is, in the case of Highland Hollow, to restore the native area, as Kelly has indicated, but also to have it very clear that the property that is the public's property, by the appearance, match to some extent, and to some extent is the hard part of the line, but when you glance at it, oh, okay, that's part of the open space. I can go there, or, oh no, that's very clearly their private yard. I'm not invited there unless they invite me, right? And that's the hard part is, the staircase leads to their yard. Number one, does the city have any liability if the staircase is there and somebody's playing on it and we leave it there? That's a question for Rob, another question that we've hit. And we haven't had a chance, this was only last week or the week before when we went and visited with them, and we came away with our heads filled with as many questions as their heads were, because the first one that we met with, right, was, boy, these are good questions that the residents raised to us, and very sincere, good questions. So we haven't had a chance to get back to them with all of them, nor have we had a chance to even discuss everything, all of our thoughts with Rob. That's kind of the general guidance we gave them is, look, the idea is that you are going to take steps as residents to transition this back to where it very clearly appears to be part of the public open space and not part of your private improvements. As we know, we've got some more that are a little more severe where we have actual structures, as Jude mentioned, and those are going to be a little more, I think, cut and dry, but even more expensive. Meaning cut and dry, but in that, well, is that now, the public's improvement? If that's being left there, or do we have to have it torn out? But when it's halfway on the line, what do you do?
Well, and I appreciate all your work. The devil's always in the details on this stuff. So I'm wondering if we want to kind of establish that this is public property, should we encourage these people to fence at their property line and just let everything beyond that fence go back natural? I mean, if you have a fence there, it doesn't look like it's part of your property. I'm just throwing this out, but it seems like if you put a barrier there and say, on this side's public, this side's our private, and just let the public part just go native, it would be an easier way, unless you've got permanent structures. I don't know, that's just my opinion. It seems like people shouldn't have encroached, but I think at the same time, I think we need to be sensitive about all the money it may cost to make it go native, so there's got to be a compromise.
That's part of why the discussion here today is so that the council can appreciate that that it's not necessarily as easy as it might look on the map of, oh yeah, let's just make that open space again. Not that I think we should stop by any reason. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that the devil's is in the details, and you get on somebody's yard and you're standing down there and you're going, this is a beautiful, beautiful yard. They've spent a lot of time and a lot of money getting this way, and how are we going to get the tractor down here to tear out this barbecue pit or to make
But
this
the
allocation?
unfortunate part is that they improved the city property. I guess we could take it over as the city fire pit if we want to have an area for, it's really the city's. I mean,
That's why I say put up a fence and just use it as a public park.
I have a couple of
I
thoughts.
just want to hear what Sarah has to say, since you you worked on this.
You've worked on this.
Yeah, and we actually talked about some of these things, and back to that slide with some of the questions, you had the option 1, the option 2. I think it makes sense to allow the residents to keep the sprinklers until the seed is established. That seems like common sense to me. And then have the staff follow up annually until it's established. I mean, it's there. We need some plants to grow back. So that just seems to be common
So what your
sense.
recommendation is maybe they would go plant back some trees or a different type of plants to let it kind of go back to that natural fill.
Let it go back to the natural fill, but we have a way to water it let's not make the problem worse and not able to grow anything. Then the finances cost of removal, I think that's just has to be borne by the residents, but I also think we need to be reasonable. If they're coming to us and they have a plan, if it takes them a little longer, I don't see a problem with us being a little bit flexible as long as we can see the progress, they have a plan, they communicate that to the city.
I would just like it all written. If they're gonna have a plan,
Yes, they
it's
need to
written.
have it written.
If
With
it needs to be-
deadlines.
Yeah, and then it has a deadline. Then if they need to extend it,
and
it has to be
deadlines.
rewritten with
Yeah.
another agreement exactly when that deadline comes due again.
Yes,
Because I think it's where you get,
Yep.
the squishiness is where we get the problem.
Mr. Mayor.
yes, in fact, I'm gonna talk, I thought about that too, because then the equipment that needs to be used, I don't know about the trail option. I think every place is gonna be a little bit different. I think maybe in this instance, it maybe makes some sense, but we don't wanna ruin more vegetation trying to get their stuff out. So I would take a recommendation from Andy on that one. Remove all improvements. This is one we had really talked about at length. Relying on city staff to decide what improvements benefit the city. And if it benefits the city, they have to understand if it's a retaining wall at the creek, it now belongs to the city. They don't have to pay to remove it, but it now belongs to the city. And leave it, because that also seems to make a lot of sense to me. Can we
Good
go to the
sense.
next slide? Because wasn't there a couple of things on, yes. So the one thing that I think we have to do though, is we have to have a penalty for those folks that are not going to engage. And if we don't have a penalty, I think what we're doing here is gonna be all for nothing. And so I think we have to, if the rest of the council is amenable to this, we need to come up with a suggestion of what that penalty is if they don't engage. Like, let's say we send a follow-up letter, we door knock, they don't engage. Penalties have got to start happening. And so it's tough, but I think they have to, and it has to be a big enough penalty that they're gonna say, I want to engage with this city. I'm going to engage with the city.
So Rob, what kind of, if we have to go on as a city and make those improvements, is it something, do we have enough leverage as a city? I mean, they've harmed, in a sense, they've damaged our property. Is that, do we have to go to the legal aspect of doing something legally where we file against them? Or is it something we can do as a policy with a penalty? Does that make sense? One is, do we have to do a legal lawsuit to get them to engage? Or can we do some type of policy where they have a penalty based that way?
So, I mean, we could go a lot of different routes, depending on what you mean by penalty. One penalty is they don't get a remediation plan, they don't get to save anything, because the city's just gonna go onto its property and cut any lines, and they just get to deal with that. And we don't owe them anything because we've given them ample notice to get off the city property. That by itself is a type of penalty. The city could also go, there's levels of trespass, and we could have a nuisance or an administrative citation that goes out for, we've tried to get you off our property, and now it's $100 every 14 days that you stay on our property, and the longer you go, it escalates. There's ways of doing that as well. If you want to have them actually pay to remove it, that's the type of thing you'd have to have, like a lawsuit or a nuisance type, a much more involved process for that. If you just want to get their attention, that's easier.
So we could have the fines and leverage fines against them?
Potentially, yes.
So, let me see if I understand what you just said. Maybe I didn't understand. So what if you had a time frame, so, the staff's talking about 3 or 4 years that they can remedy things, but they just choose not to do it, or they fall way behind. What if the city then goes in and does some changes, or takes over, cuts the lines like the mayor was talking and everything? Could we then bill them for the changes that we made?
Again, we'd have to kind of go through the more
Or you'd have to do a
involved
lawsuit?
process.
Yeah.
Unless we had, as part of their plan, they actually have an agreement, like we do with developers essentially, where they say, we're gonna put in these improvements, and if we don't, here's a bond. We could go that route, but that's very involved. I don't think that's just not feasible for residents.
One thing that I've heard threatened before. I don't know if it's actually implemented. Is the city does improvements, is the city capable of somehow placing some type of a lien on the property? Is that even possible? People threaten that, but I don't know if it's even really
I think you'd have to have the
possible.
lawsuit won to be able to get that.
You'd have to get a judgment, or you'd have to do a whole assessment area thing. Cities used to just put liens on people's properties kind of willy-nilly, and we're not allowed to anymore for obvious reasons.
So let's take it that if this was a neighbor, and I'm just gonna say, and we have to be careful because we do represent these residents. I mean, we have to understand we're their elected representatives, but let's assume I have a neighbor that has encroached on my property. I let them be aware they've encroached and they don't respond, and I try to talk to them again and they don't. Traditionally, that has given us the determination that I need to go to the next level to let them understand we now want to make a decision. I either have to just back off and leave it alone, or I need to probably, unfortunately, engage legally, where I have to then have some legal notice go out to them saying, I am not letting this go. I'm serious. If you don't remove, I have damage, and I'm going to do something to take care of the damage. Is that the route you're saying would be the legal route?
Yes, I mean, theoretically, you could almost do a mass lawsuit of the city versus 50 different residents of Highland City. And that would not be a fun lawsuit to manage.
Okay, so is it better just to come up with some sort of
Yeah, what could it
fine or
be, like a
something?
fine schedule? And then, of course,
After
if they
so
don't pay
long.
the fines, then you still have to take legal action. But I've heard of other cities, that's what they do. They have these pretty high fines.
Yes.
Where, you know, it's like hundreds of dollars a day.
And that's the thing with the fines, we can, because it involves city property, you can impose it on a almost per day basis. I've seen a lot of cities, because of some way the state law has gone, you know, doing it once every 2 weeks or it's we'll hit you with a really high fine, but if you come in and fix it now within 30 days after you've actually gotten the fine, we'll waive it. Or it's, you know, the first day is 50, after that it keeps escalating higher and higher, the longer it goes on up to the maximum we can impose per day. So we have a range of options of.
A lot of
following that
cities, so
through.
let's assume you had a violation of landscaping. You know, some cities will notice you haven't mowed your lawn. And unfortunately, maybe I've received one or two of these notices. Your lawn's dead, you've got to get it going, or you have it as a nuisance. And if you don't respond, they give you another notice. And if you don't, then all some penalties come. And
Yes.
that is very commonly done in cities where you start to have that penalty build up. And then after it builds up so much, then it goes legally. And you
usually
go with
gets
it.
sent to collections is usually the route to go, because that's cheaper to handle it than the city doing a
Okay.
lawsuit. You hand it off to someone for a certain discounted rate, and then they go do their collection suits.
That is the route I think we should go. It sounds most reasonable. But I think we have to have something in place.
We're going to have some residents that have a really major, like these we're looking at, have a bigger landscape issue. There's going to be some that they're smaller areas that they've encroached. I mean, we're looking at some large landowners that maybe done more improvements. Unfortunately, we're looking at the bigger encroachments right now.
But I think we had talked about this too, that we can't really play favorites.
can't.
Well, you encroached just a little bit, so we're going to be lenient, and you encroached a lot, so we're going to bring down the hammer. I think it has to be applied uniformly across, which, and again, I think we should be very flexible in, hey, if a resident says, here's my finance, I really can't do it for a year, and they bring us a plan with a deadline.
I think as we
should
sign.
be flexible like that, like reasonable, but for residents that just won't engage, I have less compassion for.
Well, no, and I think that's where if we knock on the door and I mean, here you've sent letters, then you're knocking on the door to engage, and it might be even sometimes illegal, you know, before it gets there going. As officials, we might need to go and say, hey, we want to make sure you understand what your concern is, because we're heading down this path, and we're going to have some that won't respond. We have some, there are business licenses that we've tried to, you know, that we're seeing out there. It's the same issue we've had with business licenses, we'll have with encroachment.
I'll say also, oh, sorry.
No, go. I was just going to say, kind of for logistics and different things. So we have our encroachment or compliance officer,
is he the main one that's knocking doors? Because it sounds like we've had the city engineer and Kelly out knocking doors, is that right? Or meeting with people? I mean, that seems like that's kind of a lot of use of, that could be, or time that could be spent elsewhere.
The reason we've had Andy and Josh involved in this, just because of the remediation efforts having to do with the conservation easement. We don't anticipate moving forward that it would always be that time intensive for those positions. We also are trying to be sensitive with our current code enforcement officer and where he lives, and that the fact that this is part of his religious boundaries. Yeah. And so we're trying to be sensitive to that. So in the future, that will change. It's just a very unique area.
Oh, okay. It just seems like that's a lot of time for Andy to spend.
Well, and I think these are our first ones. Also, I think it is helpful to have them understand.
Kind of fill it out.
Because it's also, we're trying to establish policy. Because we get going here, it's going to help us in the next decision. First decision helps the second decision, helps the third. Because when you say, well, this is what we had the other residents do, they don't feel so much picked on.
Right. Well, Andy's a great negotiator too, so.
Thank you. But that is, as the mayor indicated, and I appreciate the compliment, but that was kind of the principal reason that Josh and I went is, hey, on these first few, like I said, we came away with probably as many questions as they did, just good things that came up. It's like, okay, well, that needs to be part of our consideration, and part of the reason we're having this discussion tonight is to kind of get the feeling of the council so that, as we wade through these first few and we kind of work through some of these difficult issues, okay, this is how this program's going to work, and then it should be a little smoother.
So do you guys now have kind of a sense of where we are leaning on this issue?
Yeah.
Can I give you a summary of what I heard?
Yeah, that's what I think we need, is a summary back, what you understand.
So as we continue forward, we're going to be flexible with the individuals we're working with, both consideration of finances and potentially having equipment move on city property. We'll look through that some more rather than their private property. We will go with the option where allow the sprinklers to be left on until the seed is established, and then cap them. Cut and cap them, and then we'll allow them to leave the improvements that make sense for the city, but remove the ones that do not.
Yeah.
And we'll have Rob start working on something as far as an added portion to the enforcement policy, to add something that defines essentially that if you don't respond to us after so long, we're going to start doing fines, and if you're still not responding, then you get sent to collections for those fines.
And to me, it's not just responding to the letters, but not responding to making the improvements. I mean, if they're not responding, because they might, and I think we need to have an agreement. That's what say, okay, you recognize here, what's your plan? Do we have an agreement? If not, that starts triggering other things, because they're not, that's the non-responsive.
I will also add to that, it's going to require a code amendment. We actually had a discussion with Brent today regarding a different issue, not encroachment, but we don't have a clear-cut code on what happens if someone damages our property separate from encroachment. So this will actually be a good time. We'll wrap up and kind of cover a hole in our code about trespass and damage to city property. And that way the council will also have an insight and input and final decision on how to kind of schedule the penalties and what you'd like to see there.
So are you discussing about vandalism? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, because in fact, this is a little bit off topic, but the park behind my house on Bull River, this weekend, we had four-wheelers back there the whole weekend, notified the police, but they just ripped up that park.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Just.
And the police did not respond?
We'll talk about that probably, but they said they were understaffed. And so, but really quite a bit of damage done. And that's right behind my house, so I knew they were there, but I don't know who it was. And so.
Anyone take pictures?
And there's a lot of four-wheelers. I have pictures on my phone of some of the damage. I didn't take all of it because it's a lot.
Well, the four-wheelers even maybe.
Oh, no, but I heard them and I saw their lights, and it was after dark. So. But they've done a lot of damage out there into the park. I don't know how much sprinkler damage is done, but a lot of other damage.
Too bad.
So we should have a code to say you can't just come in and damage city property, because now kids that want to play soccer back there, it's going to be interesting.
We've had that problem in other parks. We had it down in the Windsor Park area, right? The Mitchell Hollow, I mean.
Mitchell Hollow, yeah,
And,
especially for that baseball field.
Beacon Hills, right, it got
Yeah.
all torn up, we got on the news for that one.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there should be a little sign outside these parks that says no four-wheelers, you know, no horses, whatever. Because I did talk to one of the neighbors that had done it before, and they were like, oh, it's just kids having fun. There was, you know, there's a lot of people that think this is okay.
Well, but then we have to pay out of our budget to fix it. I
The
mean,
residents
yeah.
have to pay for the repair of what they thought was fun.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that you're.
Right. But they should know, I don't know. It seems common sense to me, but.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be
Right.
very open. I do have a concern, if we call the police, they say they can't respond, we need to understand why.
I've got a problem with the police anyway, so I'm sorry.
We just need to understand.
Yeah.
And they could be short-staffed during that time, but we need to understand what's going on.
Well, then we should have some sort of surveillance, get the license plate numbers or identify them and send them a nice little bill. And if they don't pay it, throw them in jail.
Well, the problem on a four-wheeler, you probably don't have a license plate, and if it's not at dark, it's hard to get a good picture.
All right, then target practice.
I also was concerned about the liability for the city, because what they were doing is they were also pulling kids on sleds behind the four-wheelers.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
And
Where are these people?
so I was really concerned about the safety, because it was really getting wild, and I thought, wow, somebody's gonna get seriously
Oh, yeah,
injured.
whiplash for that kid.
Yeah.
Okay, does the staff
Okay.
and Rob, do you understand kind of what we're looking for, I think? Okay.
I have a comment for Rob.
Okay.
Is there any possibility for someone to assert implied easement on any of these properties?
We had that happen once, as you may recall. We actually got a threat of a legal challenge. It ultimately has been settled at this point. The answer is no, but someone has done it. I don't think it's a good claim.
What settled, meaning the suit was settled, or they had some sort of a favorable or semi-favorable outcome?
They had a favorable outcome. They got what they wanted in the end.
Why?
Well, Tim, you were part of it. It was the one up in the Beacon Hills off
No, it
Timberlane
was my
Drive.
house.
No,
I'm just kidding.
It was
wasn't.
Timberlane Drive, and where we had and we
It's the
sold
Twin
some of the
Bridges
property.
area.
We saw that was some property the city didn't need to keep, so we sold some. I think that was what they were saying, hey, this property, you've allowed my neighbors to encroach, but we ended up selling some, so I think it resolved some of the issue.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a basis for a lawsuit, or for implied easement?
I mean, no, but as you can see, the longer the encroachments go on, someone might raise it. Doesn't mean it's a good claim, but the problem becomes that, especially if we actually start taking enforcement actions, once we do that, and then if we stop, that's where the worst type of claim comes up. You know, we send letters saying get off our property, and then suddenly we decide, you know, you pushed back, so we'll just allow it to happen. That's where it becomes the most difficult to defend the city.
And then just out of curiosity, I don't know if you have been able to determine this or not, but those that are encroaching, how many of them do it knowingly, and how many of them is inadvertent?
No idea. I mean, all of them state that it's inadvertent. I think it's clear that some of them are clearly intentional, and it's pretty clear where the property line is or where a trail is, and they just choose to extend.
And Tim, I had wondered that myself, but I did notice that no one has encroached on private, like their neighbor's property, even if it's been behind them. So, I just felt like, unless they moved there and didn't do their due diligence, but I have felt like most of the time they are aware.
But who seriously puts out significant investment in property improvement without knowing if it's okay? So basically, we've got a group of people that have asked for forgiveness as opposed to permission, and then we're supposed to bend over backwards and worry about their finances, and we're supposed to worry about their feelings. Sorry, I'm in one of those moods tonight, but it just seems like we should take a hard line, and at some point, as...
Well, this is where we're at. Now, Tim, I'm gonna paint a picture.
Okay.
The homes have been there 20 years. The residents say 20 years ago they made these improvements. So now you come in there and go, well, it appears the city for 20 years has done nothing. So I'm now going to go ahead, and I feel comfortable because it's been 20 years. I'm going to improve a little bit because I've noticed my neighbors have had this property that was owned by the city. So I'm now going to move out because for 20 years the city's done nothing. And that's, I think that's where your assumption. And so Rob, if 20 years ago we haven't done anything for 20 years, do we have legality that we have to be careful with because we have not moved on this for 20 years?
So the doctrine estoppel for cities, that's what the implied easement is, I think. They can't adversely possess. You can't just encroach on city property and take it, like you can with private property sometimes. What happens though, if there's a statement, an action by the city that the city then contradicts later, that's where the most risk comes from. Usually that requires something pretty formal, like a letter saying, yeah, that's your property, just kidding, it's not, 5 years later. These are not circumstances where I don't think the city's ever gone out to anyone and said, you're allowed to go onto our property. I mean, we do hear that from time to time that, they'll talk to a staff member, we don't know who, that says, oh, they said it was fine, but nothing official, nothing approved by the council. The only time that there has been an approval is in a maintenance agreement, which are pretty clear on the terms and under which they can use it. So I'm not too worried about that type of liability.
But this is one reason we need to kind of do something is because we've had this one legal notice and stating, hey, you've not enforced this. My client is being picked upon because you're not allowing him to do things. This is one reason we've got to kind of go out.
So
and
you're
do
referring to selective enforcement as opposed to uniform enforcement?
No, we're doing uniform. We're going through.
No, I'm saying this particular individual was claiming selective enforcement.
Yeah.
Is that what they were
More or
doing?
less, and that,
Okay,
basically the
then
city
apply it
allowed
to
him to do
everyone.
this.
Okay,
So,
one other question. Is it out of the question to say, fine, this is city property, we will lease it to you on a year-to-year basis, and you
Ooh,
will
not
pay
gonna
X amount of dollars to have this, and then we can use that to, why are you covering your face like that?
Because
There's nothing wrong with,
No, this was a discussion we had.
yeah, we've had this discussion. It's-
Yeah, I'm quite opposed to the leasing.
I personally kind of like the lease, but.
I like it too, because we keep our land, we make money, we're able to put that toward
understand
maintenance
that,
of trails or whatever we want to do. How come you're opposed to it, Sarah?
Well, because I think others are waiting in the wings that will just take quite a bit and then ask for a lease.
Great, let's make some money.
And then where do we draw the line of what we aren't going to do?
Lease also states ownership.
I don't think, does it imply ownership?
No, because if you grant a leasehold interest, it's very clearly not ownership. And we had talked about that as an option of, we'll give you time to remove, or we'll start charging you here's your lease agreement. You get to agree to this or not, and you charge a fee based on square footage. If you get 3 council members, we'll go that route too.
Doesn't sound like I'm going to, but
You're close. You got 2. You got to get 1 more, and you might go the lease route.
it just annoys me that people do something purposefully and knowingly and then expect it to stand because they've got a lawyer that's going to say, oh, this is an implied easement. Guess what? It's not. Anyway, okay.
Well, and I just am delighted to bring this up because you knew I would. But I think one of the problems, if you go back to the mayor's argument, I've done this for 20 years, the city hasn't, quote, done anything with this property, but you can also add in, Anaheim have paid $20 a month for the city to maintain it, and they haven't done it. And so the problem in my mind has always been the open space fee kind of entitles some people in their minds to encroach. That's why I would like to get rid of the open space fee, because it eliminates that argument. But
Too.
I
Yeah.
would as well. So
Okay,
we have
good,
enough people
good.
for that.
Very good point, Dr. Smith, but I still want the lease and I still want the money.
Okay, so
Well,
what
I'm
else do we
supporting on
need
the
to
lease.
do
Okay,
to
let's
move
talk
on
about,
here?
on this, we need to talk about maintenance agreements.
Sorry, really quick, this is the document that y'all have in front of you. It's an Excel sheet that we have in our records that we made and updated, now finding out that there are, now that we've updated the new maintenance agreement, that there are 4 types of maintenance agreements. It took me 10+ hours of sitting on my office floor and going through every single one to really understand and realize what the terms were for each of these. Type 1, that's the first and oldest maintenance agreement. There is no expiration. This is where we got a couple of residents here and there saying, I basically have an eternal maintenance agreement. And we were like, no, it's 10 years. All of them are 10 years. Not true. Some of them have no expiration, and we just have to give them a 90-day notice. Within 90 days, they have to have their maintenance agreement or their maintenance removed. Type 2 renews automatically every 2 years, and then we have to provide them at least 12 months notice before the anniversary date of the agreement. It's worked out, if you see on that Excel sheet, where the expiration dates are. We went ahead and sent out the expiration notices for this type of maintenance agreement, understanding that some of them, because of the date that we're at, won't expire until 2025.
Perfect.
And then type 3, this is the one we're almost familiar with, the 10 years, and then it expires upon notice. And then type 4, the one the council just adopted in July, with the 5 years expires upon notice. The goal ultimately is to get every single one of these signed onto our new maintenance agreement. Like I said, type 2, we went ahead and sent out expiration notices. We also, in those letters, sent them their existing maintenance agreement with the existing image that they submitted years ago saying we will follow this. We called out saying if there are any improvements that are not in line with this maintenance agreement and you want to update it, you have to enter into the new one. Otherwise, here's your expiration date. We also just, in the understanding of with the other types, with the other 3 types, our understanding as staff is that we would just, like we discussed earlier, address these along with going by the subdivision by subdivision process, addressing the encroachments and sellable open space. We'll then address these existing maintenance agreements. And then the other understanding that we want to call out for the council, just based on the new policy, if these residents enter into the new maintenance agreement, it will be expected that they would have to follow the requirements in the new maintenance agreement. One of those things being the maximum of 2,500 square feet of irrigable square footage. And so the point of, if they have an existing maintenance agreement that was 10 years and they want to open or enter into the new one, they'll have to adjust their old maintenance agreement to now follow new requirements. And so if the council has any concerns with that, we'd have to change the policy to make sure it was in line with what the council is wanting, but we just wanted to make sure it was clear that that was what's expected.
Thanks for the research on this. So the new maintenance agreement is kind of a variation of type 4, isn't it?
Yes,
5-year
that's
agreement.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, but let's talk about, so we have some that have a current maintenance agreement that was over 2,500 square feet of irrigatable. They went and, so they enter in a maintenance agreement, so that we just need some feedback. They enter in a maintenance agreement, say even 5 years ago. That maintenance agreement had more than 2,500 square feet of, they could go and improve. So we've had some residents go out and improve some more than 2,500 feet. Our new maintenance agreement states they cannot have more than 2,500 feet of irrigatable lawn or whatever it might be, but yet we've allowed some in the past, so they've went and spent money past that 2,500 square feet. So we need some feedback on if they had an existing maintenance agreement and we're now saying, do they need to come in conformance with the new one, including the 2,500 square feet, where they've made improvements based off of the old maintenance agreement, or what's the feeling there? Does everyone understand what I'm asking?
So are you saying, should we have a grandfather clause?
I feel like it should be grandfathered.
That's what I'm saying. If you have some you already gave a maintenance agreement to and they've made those improvements, should we grandfather that back in? It's gingered. You got some that, the boy, you've got some out there that you have. You've got a Boyd Timothy, you've got a Ginger Harris that has some. Some of those we've allowed that have probably the retention area in the Wimbledon.
Yeah, they're maintaining the retention areas.
I'm just saying but we sent out the new maintenance agreement and it states they can't have more than 2,500 square feet. So.
That's your grandfather now. I think we
Okay,
need to
grandfather, Sarah, what do you feel? What do you feel, Tim? Grandfathered on this. If they have a current maintenance agreement and they were able in that maintenance agreement, they gave a plan, they could irrigate more than 2,500 square feet, are you okay grandfather them in?
As long as what they have done met the original.
Okay, so as long as it met their
Right.
original plan.
Yeah, if they've
Okay.
done out of that, then.
Okay.
I think
Tim?
that's wise, because some of them are retention basins.
I agree with Sarah.
Okay.
And I think that's something we want to make sure the council, and hopefully we're scaling all of these back with the other encroachments. It's really a water issue too, right? As we've talked about, our systems aren't built to handle that because we weren't intending. But these are a minor number in comparison with the 250 encroachers that we do have as
And
well.
that's what it's saying is, you go through this list, I don't think you have a lot on here that have, there might come across a couple other larger, but we are trying to do some water-wise. I mean, here we are talking about xeriscape at the beginning, and here we are saying, oh, but I think these are existing, and so I do think we need to be sensitive.
Yeah, it's all
on that.
future stuff, xeriscape.
So,
Okay.
Yes.
And just a reminder, all of these renewals are entering into the updated maintenance agreement. Each individually comes to the council for approval. And so if in the future, for some reason, you're thinking, we need to limit this amount of grass on this specific property, then that's something that the council would be able to do then.
so Rob and Kelly, if we state that there's some maintenance agreements that can be grandfathered with over 2,500 square feet, is that a one-off case we do, or do we need to make any amendment to our existing policy?
Put it actually in the
I'm gonna
encroachment
pull up the policy to see, I believe we allowed in the policy as drafted that we could make exceptions and have special terms and conditions. I'm just gonna double check that.
As you've went out and sent, so you've now sent letters to all these, what's been your feedback from the letters?
Honestly, I have not gotten any feedback from the letters. It actually came to my attention because one resident came and brought their terms up to me, and so that's where it was like, I really need to look into this, and then organized all this information.
It
But
was
since
some of
sending
them
out,
had a renewable one, right?
uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah, so since sending them out, I haven't gotten any feedback.
So the one that's the oldest out there that would renew, so help us understand, so I'm gonna go off the Canterbury Fields, you have Aaron Cyril. Are you saying that that maintenance agreement will not expire until 2031?
His was relatively new, it was just last year, and he entered into that 10-year agreement. So by the policy, the ones that the council approved, we would abide by their expiration.
And then if they don't have an expiration date, is that stating that there's just a 90-day notice?
That's correct.
So under the policy as written, the council can put terms and conditions on any maintenance agreement it finds is appropriate. So it'd be up to you whether you want to amend the policy to add in a grandfather type provision that makes that more express, or just to handle it on a case-by-case basis.
What would you like, council, do you want to have it now, put in that things will be grandfathered? I mean, you can tell we don't have a ton we're talking about, or do you want to do it on a case-by-case basis? Either have it, we could change the policy, if they have a maintenance agreement, their agreement off what they drew, if we accept it, it's grandfathered in, or what even any past council has accepted.
So the staff's looking at the agreement, make sure they're meeting what they agreed to.
Yeah, we were reviewing all of these, and as they come to update, they'll be moved on to the current version with all of the other terms. The only thing that would be the exception would be, basically, I think mostly just area, and potentially some improvement types that are no longer permitted. And so all of those contracts, as we, shift them from the old versions to the new one, they'll all have to come to you for approval. The question is, I think, the council indicating you'd like to grandfather some of those other terms in. Do you just want to handle that as the contracts come in, or would you rather have it in the policy that says specifically the council will allow for grandfathering of certain types of?
So this is not the whole list of the whole city, this is just
This is what we have as
Those are
agreements.
all
we
the
know of.
maintenance
All the
agreements that we
we know
have.
of.
for the whole city.
For the whole city.
So we're talking about a very small,
It's not that many, and
And of those, you maybe have 5 that might have over 2,500 square feet.
yeah.
Right.
Well, I guess I'd want it grandfathered just because I don't want people getting a letter saying, hey, you have to tear out all your grass because it's over 2,500.
And I'm going to go with, I'm going to give a recommendation. We might not be on the council for them to remember when this comes up. And I think we sent the notice, we probably ought to handle the issue now as the notice went out. I mean, versus in 3 years, I don't know who will be here. We don't know if all of us will be here at that time. And so I think we understand it, and it helps us because we're the ones sending the agreements.
Right. I'd probably put the grandfathering into the policy
That's what I'm saying.
itself.
So I think the
yeah.
grandfather should be in.
Yeah,
It helps
especially
'cause
for
it's
these are clearly the people that work to get an agreement in place.
Now, be aware, as we go out and send some encroachment stuff, we might find other policy spot, other maintenance agreements that have been entered into. Now, the question will be, some might have not been entered into this, the council agreed. We'll have to kind of see how, it might, well, they could, who knows? I mean, we might find other agreements we didn't know were entered into.
Right. Well, I just want to express my appreciation to Kelly and all those who worked on this, Aaron, because you've had to do a lot of research. So
Well,
I
if you
appreciate
can't tell, our encroachment and this maintenance has taken Kelly and some of our staff some time, and hopefully it will kind of get in a little bit of a system, but it's taken time. It's maybe good that development's slowing down a little bit. Okay, anything else here we need to go over on that item there, on item number 5A? Okay.
That was a big item.
Okay, let's now go back to item number 4, which is an action item, which is a final plat update of Ridgeview Plat F, Plat G, and Plat J.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I apologize that this is having to come back to y'all after how many times y'all have seen this, but it just happened to be something that we didn't catch at the time, unfortunately. A few years ago, this Ridgeview plan development was approved by the council. November 9, 2021 was when the preliminary plat for Pod B, which is that whole northern section, was approved by the council. June 21st was when the final plats were approved for both F and G, which are Lennar and David Weekly homes. And then on September 20th, just recently, the final plat for Plat J was approved, and that's Ivory Homes. This is primarily what we're talking about is 10100 North, that road just south of Lone Peak High School that leads onto Highland Glen. Just to gauge or understand who's landscaping what, all of the interior landscaping is being maintained by the HOA. So all park strips and the wider park strip along Featherstone Drive. So Featherstone Drive, Dorado Way, Canal Boulevard, Elmfield Way, all of those roads are being maintained by the HOA. As far as landscaping maintained by the city, we're maintaining the parkway detail along North County Boulevard, just like we typically do. As far as the park strip and property between the sidewalk and the fence, we are maintaining along 10100. Something that was pointed out to us by the engineer on the project was that we were listed as maintaining that strip between the sidewalk and the fence, but it was under the HOA's ownership. And so, and after discussing with a few members of staff, it was just understood that if we're gonna maintain it, we'd rather own it to have full rights to the property. And so we asked their engineer to drop this cross-section, and it's one that we will have on all 3 of the plats, of Plat F, Plat G, and Plat J. We also asked them to add this illustration of the fence to make sure that it was understood that the HOA would be maintaining and owning the fence and that the city would have no liability for that fence. And also, all fences in Ridgeview are owned and maintained by the HOA. We just had we had a developer trying to argue differently, and that's why we're making it very clear on the plats. This is just showing what the change was. To make it easier on us, we were just asking them to make it as right-of-way rather than a strip or a small parcel that the city owned. So on each plat, it's designated as city right-of-way as part of 10100 North. And so those are all just the little portions or curves that changed on the plats themselves. Yeah.
Let me clarify this. So what you're saying is on the city side of their walls, we not only maintain it, but are we going to landscape it?
They will be landscaping, all the landscaping, correct. On 10100, they are installing. They're doing the same thing on North County Boulevard. They install all of the landscaping.
So are we going to encourage them to xeriscape as much as possible?
That's a good question.
Example? Yes.
So Josh is our primary, he's the one that's doing majority of the reviews on this. It's actually still under review. He's meeting with them this week. But basically right now they're mimicking, for 10100, they're mimicking what they have done on North County Boulevard and have planned to do, where it's technically xeriscaping on all the park strip side, and then on the side in between the sidewalk and the fence, it's pieced, and so there are portions of grass that are sectioned just to give it some dimension, because as far as, this is kind of what Commissioner Howden brought up when he spoke with Spencer Moffett, but that they, because it wasn't a consideration before, they wanted to be consistent along the borders of their development and have little pieces of grass to break up the landscaping.
So it'll be kind of a mixed, like they've
It
done
will
on
be
Canal
mixed.
Boulevard.
It's technically majority xeriscaping, but there are portions of grass that will need to be mowed.
But we'll have to mow those pieces.
That's correct.
What's your feelings on that, Andy? Because they're gonna have all these little patches of grass, that's gonna be a little labor intensive for the city to mow those pieces. I mean, if they're patches.
Right, you know, you got two cents. Number one, the kind of blended plan, if you will, probably meshes a little bit more with some of the existing aesthetic. And so there's some thought that, well, that's kind of the way we started, and so from an aesthetic standpoint, makes sense to finish that way, as far as bridge view, if you will. But from a maintenance standpoint, it's probably the worst of all worlds. You have
It's
the
patchworking, yeah.
you have the patchwork that you still got to mow each week, and then you have, like we talked about, the ebbs and the flows of the xeriscape, and so it's kind of probably you know, the worst situation for us in that regard. But from an aesthetic standpoint, it would look different if it was all xeriscape.
But the landscaping hasn't been put in really from from Canal Boulevard north, because
Right.
they're just developing that, nor along the high school road there. I'm just wondering if you couldn't kind of come with a compromise and maybe have grass along by the fence, and then the park strip between the sidewalk and the road be xeriscaped. That would decrease your maintenance, but it would still be
Encouraging more grass.
50-50. Does that make sense?
Yes, it is an idea. Before Josh reviewed the plan, I tried to make it very clear, hey, we're maintaining it, you're maintaining it, so make any comments that, well, are concerning for you as far as the maintenance, and he didn't request any changes as far as changing the ground coverage, but I'm sure if it's something that the council would want, Boyer would be open to
Yeah, it just
working
seems
with.
common sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a question that maybe I didn't catch, but why can't we require the homeowner, the HOA to maintain those sections as well? They own it.
It's
their development.
Very good question, and I went back to the development agreement and the plan development, and it's gotten to the point where, because it's not outlined in the development agreement, we've gotten to the point where we can't require them, or that's what I've been told at this point
But they own
in the
it, right?
process.
'Cause I think this is a very good point that Sarah's bringing up. We don't own that, right? Well, they're having us trying to take the burden for the buffer right now. If we don't take the burden, someone has to maintain that. It's HOA owned. Just because it's not in the agreement, they own it, they need to maintain it. So I guess our question is, why do we want to take upon that maintenance? Why
So
are we taking that?
one thing to consider
Yeah.
too, Mayor and Council, is the PD is very specific about who when we've asked them to maintain something. So they are maintaining Canal Boulevard, and they are maintaining North County, and the PD specifically
Not
was
North
that
County.
out.
Sorry, they
Sorry.
don't maintain North County. They maintain Featherstone.
Featherstone, excuse me, I'm misspeaking.
That's okay.
Whereas this was left, it was not called out who's maintaining it, and so in their mind, it's defaulting back, well, you didn't tell us we're doing it, so you're doing it. One thing that we do want to, they brought up, and it's a valid point, is this is an entrance to Highland Glen Park for us, right? So this is something that we might want to think of in that regard. And we actually thought that it would be beneficial for residents in that so we're talking about two pieces of grass or something on either side of a sidewalk. Do you really want two different maintenance companies having to go in and handle that, right? Or is it more cohesive for us to just handle everything?
That was my next question. The city owns the park strip. Well, why did we take upon, but the city doesn't come mow the park strip in front of my house, even though the city owns it, I mow it. So why is this property owner being treated different and they don't have to maintain the park strip? I'm just going, to me, it goes the other way. Well, if they own that, we have a requirement in the city that we kind of require the property owner that does it to maintain the park strip. So why are we taking on the park strip and the buffer? I understand it goes down that we're trying, but why are we taking on this responsibility when this appears to be a property owner that should be doing that?
So can I clarify what we're talking about then, so I understand? Okay. So they're required to put in the park strip between the street and the sidewalk and up to the fence, right? And what they're saying is they want the city then to maintain everything on the side of the fence towards the street.
That is correct.
And so, do we require other developers to maintain the property on the other side of the fence? Is that true of everybody?
No, this is different because this is a PUD.
It's not, that's the issue.
Yeah. This is a
Subdivisions
PD.
with parkway detail, the city does maintain it on the other side of the fence. Technically, the fence is the ownership of the adjacent property owner,
Right.
but we maintain the other side of the fence, and that's why we maintain North County Boulevard.
But with
Do
it
you
being
wanna
a
talk about
PUD,
ownership?
is this the difference because it's a PUD is why we're having a question where if it would,
PD.
a PD,
Either or, yeah.
if it had been just a standard subdivision, like you said, if it was not, you know, that designation, we would be taking care of it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, to Aaron's point before, like, you write a development agreement to hash out these details and make sure that city has this, developer has this is how it's split up, and finalize those things in an agreement and have both parties enter into it. We've had a lot of lessons learned through the process of reviewing Ridgeview, where next time we do a development agreement, we're going to need a lot of these details hashed out from the beginning. That's where we've come to a lot of issues with these half-street improvements on 10100, because 10100 wasn't really thought through, if I'm being honest.
City side, but we're dealing with a very professional developer that's done this several times. So I'm just gonna be, yeah, we maybe got taken advantage of the city because we have not done a lot of these type of developments, but they have. And so I think, I think we gotta be careful that they you know, there's some ambiguity here.
So I guess my feeling is if we do agree to maintain on the side of the fence, I mean, that's the argument tonight, it seems to me like we should be able to make our maintenance easier by kind of dictating how they design it, because it makes no sense to me to have lots of little patches. They'll be impossible to maintain, and why would they want to make it tough for us to maintain it? Because it's the view of their development, and so they want it to look nice, you know, so I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with Scott. I think if we have to take on this burden, which I wish we didn't, but it sounds like maybe we do, then we should be able to dictate a little bit about how it's landscaped, so to make it easier for our crew to take care of it.
Because we want it to look nice, yeah.
Agreed.
So Kurt, what do you think we should do here? What would you do?
I mean, here's our problem. We've gotten others, if this is a standard subdivision, we would be maintaining this.
Yeah.
This is a PD. They maintain Canal Boulevard, so we can say, okay, well, you have the assumption you did Canal Boulevard.
Yeah.
We understand North County, we were gonna do, this was that assumption. I mean, I'd love to have them maintained if there's a way to get them to maintain it, so we don't have to take the burden up on it. But I don't know, the question is, Rob, where are we at in this development agreement? Are we buying to be able to do this, or is this where there's not enough definition on how to handle it?
Because it's squishy in a way, because the development doesn't address it. They could say, you didn't tell us we had to take it, so we don't have to maintain it, period. We could just let that sit on the other side of the fence and not maintain it. It'll stay our property, and we just don't care because our residents are never going to see it. And if you would like that on your roads, because we didn't force them to accept it beforehand, that's their fallback position. So.
Now, the other option is, can we specify if we're going to, because right now they're asking for us to take this upon. We could say, well, take it upon, I mean, this is, we'll do it, but we want it xeriscaped on this side for us to take up on that responsibility. I mean, that, because they're
We've
asking.
got to
us-
make it simpler.
Right, and I think my understanding is we haven't fully finalized the details of the landscaping, so we can still have that discussion and determine how that works out. This is finalizing who owns and maintains that property, and the understanding's always been that the city was going to maintain it, and so when we're looking at it, the question was, shouldn't we also own it if we're going to
Now,
be
who
doing all
had
this
that
work for it?
understanding the city was always going to maintain it?
In theory, Boyer did, right? And
Yeah.
so,
And when we tried to verify it, we came to this conclusion about the development agreement not covering it a different way.
So,
I've had that understanding for the last 6 months or so, and I racked my brain trying to figure out where it came from. Did it come straight from Boyer? Did it come from my previous boss? I couldn't remember and couldn't put the pieces together, but it got to the point where it was an understanding and discussion for so long, it felt like it was too late to flip it and say, you know what, just kidding, you maintain this whole street. So,
well, but they're still obligated to landscape it.
that's correct, yes.
But we can determine how it's landscaped a little bit. We still have that feed. Yeah. What do you think, Andy? Because your group's going to be maintaining it. I would xeriscape it between the city. and
To say to update the landscaping to be easy maintained.
Yeah, so, sorry, I just had a question for Rob that I wanted to clarify. I think if the feeling of the council is you're willing to take it, but you want 100% landscape and you don't want the patchwork effect, so to speak.
Right.
So to speak, then in your motion tonight, give us that guidance. I think that part of Josh's hesitancy on making comments is a little bit of him not understanding, well, what do I have the power to change and not change a little bit, because a lot of Ridgeview's kind of already decided, you know, and laid out, and so that would be very helpful for the parks staff and for our communication with the developer to say, okay, we'll take it, but the landscaping is going to be 100% xeriscape, and we understand it doesn't look like what you did, but you're also telling us this is a different street, because you're saying we have to maintain it, and you're maintaining those other streets, so if you want it to look like the other ones, then you maintain it.
So would you say 100% xeriscaping, or maybe you have xeriscaping between the street and the sidewalk, maybe grass in the back? Because that could be, you could maintain that pretty easy.
Yeah.
Because xeriscape that whole street would be really expensive, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think that's what we should require, one for the ease, and two, because that's where we're headed in the city with water. So, I don't know if we're ready for a motion, but I'm ready to make one.
Go ahead and make a motion.
I move that the city council approve the adjustment to Ridgeview Plats F, G, and J relating to the city right-of-way, subject to the,
There's these stipulations here.
yeah, what stipulations, oh, you have those pulled up on the thing. Subject to, the recorded plat shall be in substantial conformance with the final plat dated October 11, 2022, except as modified by these stipulations. All stipulations of the original final plat approvals be met, and also that that entire section is xeriscaped with trees and bushes to come before the council for approval.
Can I just ask for a clarification? When you're mentioning everything xeriscaped, are you talking the park strip and the behind the sidewalk to the fence also
To the wall.
xeriscaped? Okay, so that is your motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion by Sarah, second by Kim. Is there any further discussion before we go to vote? Okay. Anyone need?
I guess I'm kind of still
Wants to
struggling.
amend
I
it
like the
for grass.
xeriscape idea, but I don't know if it seems kind of onerous to have to do a whole street in xeriscape. It seems like you could have kind of a
You want grass right
compromise. I
there?
was thinking grass by the fence and then xeriscaping out. That's kind of the way I would lean.
Is that okay, Andy? I mean, what would you prefer?
I mean, you want it all xeriscape.
Well, I think that what we would prefer is uniform sections. I mean, yeah, I mean, if we're gonna have some xeriscape, I'd probably rather have all xeriscape. But like I said before, the patchwork quilt effect, make a beautiful quilt, probably makes a nice landscape to look at. A lot of what they've done is very aesthetic, but makes it difficult maintenance. So I'd rather just have all xeriscape, as per the motion that was made, would be my preference.
So are we gonna require the curvy sidewalks there?
That one's just straight on 10100, that's
Okay.
straight. The curvy sidewalks are going in on North County Boulevard per the Parkway detail.
Right.
But the 10100 is just straight.
So if you have straight, it still doesn't make sense to xeriscape from that to the city, or to the street, and have grass on between that and the wall.
Kelly, how wide is it between the sidewalk and the fence?
5 feet.
So you are gonna run into water issues. I mean, it's going to get onto the sidewalk, but, so I think another option council consider is, you know, Councilmember Peterson's motion asked for us to bring back the landscape plan. So you could kind of give us some discretion to work with them on a minimal maintenance landscape plan and then have it come back. If you want to see it, before the final or, before it.
Now, the motion was for 100% to be xeriscaped. It was
Right.
not,
But for the landscape plan to come back
Correct.
for our approval, because I didn't want to just give them wide berth
correct,
and create something that we really didn't want there.
correct, okay.
Just to clarify that, you're saying the landscape plan for 10100 specifically, or are you also
I think
saying
it's
for,
10100,
I think the motion is, it's a
10100.
10100 north,
so just for 10100?
100% xeriscape, but it has to come back for approval of the city council.
Okay.
That is what the motion is. Are we ready to go ahead and vote?
So does that mean when it comes back, we will have the option of,
To
let's
say
say,
yay or nay.
70% xeriscape, correct?
Mhm. Yeah, if we don't like the plan, or if it's just not making sense.
Well, because it states 100%, so.
Well, but xeriscape can have plants and, you know, all this stuff. It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Yeah, because I
That's
did,
it.
I
All
did
right.
specify in the motion that it had to have trees and bush and plants,
Okay,
subject to our approval.
all right, I'm ready.
Okay. If there's no further further discussion or clarification,
No.
we'll go ahead and go to vote. Is Brittany online and could she vote? Oh, she has voted. I guess that answers the question. Okay. That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to item number 5B, a sewer lift station code amendment. Andy, we are at 9:26. We have a hard dead date. We have to be out here by 10. I'd like to be out here earlier than that.
Do we have an executive session?
We do not.
There's
Oh
a
my gosh.
resolution that actually says we need to end our meetings at 10 PM.
So, okay.
I can make this one pretty quick. This year, we spent $2.3 million fixing sewer lift stations. We are proposing a code amendment that says no more sewer lift stations beyond the ones we already have. I just want to know if the council's supportive of that, and that's the long and short of it.
Any input on that? We've
What's
spent
the-
$2.3 million in updating our sewer lift stations. Andy is proposing that we do not allow any new subdivisions with sewer lift stations.
What's
Yeah.
the other
Ah.
option?
It's just gravity. I mean,
Oh, I
you
see.
know, so, and the only area that I believe this impacts, is you've got the large cavernous pit at the, gravel pit. Other than that, I think everywhere else in the city can be served by gravity means, you know.
So what it's saying is if they are down at the bottom of the gravel pit, they'd have to pump up. We're saying they can't unless they raise it up and flow it
Yeah,
out.
or it'd have to be some type of private system or something else, but nothing that the city would maintain.
I like it.
You know, so.
Great, yep.
Feedback? Everyone okay if that comes forward to the council that we have a policy, no more lift stations?
Great idea.
I agree, and I like your brevity.
I'll defer to Andy's judgment.
I think we have to bring it back. Okay, we'll now move on to Park Strip Code update. Kelly?
Also very brief, we found a hole in our code, another one, happy day. In our code, we don't specify or require that the property owner adjacent to Park Strip in a right-of-way has to maintain it. So, that's where we came to another issue with the discussion that we just had. is it's not in our code. And so we're doing a code update to make it clear that the property owner adjacent to a park strip has to landscape and maintain that park strip.
But is that if the park strip's in front of their house? I mean, does this
It's
mean all the
along
people
all
on Alpine
sides, so
Highway need to start maintaining it?
If they live on a corner lot,
Uh-huh.
they have to maintain the park strip on both sides. It's where their property abuts right of way. They maintain that park strip. Parkway detail is a different story where,
So there's a definition between the two.
yes, yes.
But we have to be able to clarify that for the citizens because, yeah.
In the existing code, we have a specific code called Parker planter strips, and it has a definition of them, and we're all.
So this whole time, I've been maintaining my corner lot park strips
And you
out there
didn't even
in the
have
100-degree weather, mowing them, and I could have had you guys been doing it.
Well, we wouldn't have done it.
Is it really you or is it your kids?
Oh, it's my kids.
Hey, so a question on this, when you say maintain, are you talking only the mowing? I understand, do we have a code in there that also if there is snow on the sidewalk, that we have to remove the snow off of that sidewalk?
I thought we did within 24 hours.
I thought so too. And you can look at it.
We'll have to
Anyway, so
check.
on
I mean,
this,
honestly, we say that there is when we send out the snow removal
Okay, so on
stuff.
Park Strip, the question is, let's assume is this code, once it goes in effect that people now will have to, even if they have a current existing Park Strip, now have to maintain, or is it only those going forward that a new build? I guess it depends if we grandfather or not, right? Rob?
This isn't,
It's city policy to do it this way. We've been doing it for
yeah, I mean, this is less of a use thing and more of a,
legal hold.
yeah. And
It's a cleanup.
it's a cleanup thing. You know, we can regulate how people, I mean, this is actually not how people use their property, it's how they use city property. We're telling them you have to use our city property in a certain way. So they didn't have a right to not maintain our property, if that makes sense.
So we could require
We're
people to
firmly
come down
putting a
and mow the
burden
city
on
park.
people
That'd be amazing.
that they already had.
During
most of them.
baseball season, I do mow it, so.
Okay. Any input on this Park Strip thing you'd like to give council or to the staff?
Clean it up, yeah.
It's a code cleanup. Okay, the next thing is council policy and procedures, Aaron Wells.
And I'm going to go ahead, well, I'll set the stage a little bit and then let Rob start out. So there were some questions that came up in relation to some recent agenda items, like whose job is it to create the agenda and what does that process look like and things. And so Stephanie and I have done some research, and there is one council policies and procedures that has been adopted, but there are 3 different draft versions out there, and staff was actually working off of a draft version, thinking that was the adopted version. So we haven't been letter of the law to the policy. It's been more of a practice, and here's what we've done. And so I'm going to have Rob, we wanted to get this updated, right, and make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward as to whose job is what and how does this all work. So I'm going to have Rob do some training on rules and procedures from a legislative standpoint, right? What is state code and our municipal code outlined? And then the next step, we would like to your direction on how to do it, but can we get an updated code and policy and procedures manual that we're all on the same page about? And so, and I'd like and Rob will get to this as to how do you want to do that? Do you want to do working groups? Do you want staff to start tackling it? What do you want to do? But that's set the stage.
So this is just a brief overview or refresher for, I'm sure, all of you on what does the state law say your job is and your division of responsibilities between you as council members, the mayor, and the city administrator. So Highland City, we're going back to basics here. Highland City is the 6-member council form of government. Often known as the weak mayor form of government. That is not a slight to Mayor Osler. That is just how it's designated. It's in opposition to cities like Sandy or Provo, where they have a separate mayor who has an executive office, much like the President of the United States that operates separately from Congress. The strong mayor form of government operates in that way. Here, Mayor Osler is a member of the council, just with certain limited obligations regarding voting and additional obligations regarding running the meetings. So this is all state law. This is the default rules that apply for the 6-member council form of government for all cities. The mayor is the chief executive officer to whom all employees report. The mayor enforces and carries out all ordinances, laws, resolutions, policies enacted by the council. The mayor reports the condition and needs of the city to the council. The mayor recommends measures to the council. That's often seen as the agenda setting part of the law, where the mayor kind of brings the things to the council where not otherwise requested by the council. The mayor appoints officers with your advice and consent. Officers is a special term that refers to certain classes of people, like Stephanie as the city recorder, me as the city attorney, city engineer, city administrator, where the mayor kind of puts someone forward and the council ratifies that or not. Then in terms of meetings, the mayor is the chair of the council. What that means is not defined by state law. It just says the mayor is the chair. By practice, and that means the mayor runs all of the meetings, and typically, and actually it's somewhat required by state laws, councils have rules and procedures for how the mayor goes about doing so and how the council interacts with that. That's what Aaron was talking about, and something we're trying to get updated so we're all on the same page. Finally, the mayor votes on ties, votes on administrators, and votes on any ordinance that would change the mayor's powers, which we'll get to in a little bit because Highland City has done that. Finally, the mayor is the budget officer unless someone else is appointed. So default rules for mayor is that. The council is everything else. The council is a legislative body, so you adopt, amend, repeal ordinances, codes, policies, rules, procedures. That's all on the council. You adopt policies for the regulation and administration of the city, that then the mayor, is back to the other one, the mayor carries those out. So you adopt the policies, mayor executes on the policies. You prescribe the duties and powers of officials and officers of the city, and then at times you act as an administrative body. Those powers that are not given to the mayor, the council has. We often see this with land use. You are the administrative body that decides a lot of land use matters like plats and things of that nature. You are exercising executive, you're carrying out the law. Finally, your power includes adjusting the mayor's powers and or giving them to a city administrator or manager. So by and large, the council is higher level by design under state law. You set budgets that then get carried out by the mayor and staff. You set policies and set codes and rules that then get carried out by someone else, specifically the mayor, or in Highland City's case, city administrator with the mayor. So in terms of city administrator, there is no state statute on what a city administrator does. That is all set by the council. There used to be an old form of government called the council manager form of government. The state legislature abolished that form of government, so that doesn't operate. There's no council manager form of government. What you have is these council forms of government that then establish an administrator, and you adopt a code that says what the administrator does. So in our city code, previous councils have stated that the city administrator is the chief administrative officer to whom all employees report. That's almost word for word what the normal obligation of the mayor is, because that is the power that the council has taken from the mayor and given to the city administrator. So the administrator runs staff in Highland City. Everyone reports to the administrator. There is a provision in state law basically says councils, you can basically ask reports and demand accounting from any officer and employee of the city, but otherwise employees report now from city code to our new city administrator, Aaron. The administrator supervises city operations, projects, and city property, both real property and personal property, all the equipment we have. The city administrator assists with establishing and administering the budget. Interesting, the administrator specifically assists the mayor in the mayor's job as budget officer. This is another overlap between the mayor and administrator, so the administrator also executes, enforces, and carries out laws, rules, and policies. Essentially, you can designate as a council which group you want to have, which person takes on certain roles. And you'll see this in our purchasing policy, where the council will say, administrator, you can authorize up to X dollars. Mayor, you can go beyond that, and then past a certain limit, everything comes back to us. So you set the policy and then kind of say, you administering this function, mayor, you in this function, everything else back to us as council. The administrator also specifically says is to prepare and submit ordinances, resolution, plans, programs, and policies to you for recommendation. This is back to the agenda setting thing. The city administrator has authority under city code to bring matters to the council for you to consider. Administrator also reviews claims, usually meaning legal claims, complaints, and issues that are presented to the city. It goes to the city administrator, who then passes it on to the city council for a final decision. The administrator specifically has the right to participate during meetings, just can't vote on anything. But the mayor specifically is assigned and retains the authority to make appointments of city officers. So it's not delegated to the administrator.
The mayor appoints and removes city officers, but I thought that's with council.
With council, yes.
With approval from the council.
Correct.
I mean, he couldn't go willy-nilly and just fire everybody without talking to the council.
No. So he could remove without advice of the council. He cannot appoint.
Well, hold on, that's important. So you're saying, now, okay, an unreasonable situation that the mayor can go and just start removing people, is just we can't appoint them?
Yes.
Okay, that might, and if we're not we could change things, I'm not saying.
Well, I just think it should be.
Who would be the ones we could remove?
Yeah.
So this is where the difference between
Like, what's a city officer?
There's statutory officers in city code. These are all the at-will officers, so that is city recorder, city treasurer, city engineer, city administrator, city attorney.
Oh, you, Rob.
Oh yes, me.
Are you sure it's not in the code that we have to have a consent of the council on those?
I think it should be in there. I think it just makes sense.
So typically, state law just says can appoint with the advice and
Is
consent
this, where are
an
you
officer.
pulling this, so this information, where are you pulling this? You're saying
Hey.
that we have it in our stuff.
Code.
Where's this, it's just in our code?
So yes, so I'll actually pull up the exact language from our city code. So powers and duties of mayor. Chief Executive Officer, so this is City Code 212060. Except as may be otherwise specifically provided by law or ordinance, the mayor, by and with the advice and consent of the city council, may appoint all officers and agents of the city as may be provided by law or ordinance. So officers meaning those that have a specific office created in law. And in like manner may fill all vacancies occurring in the same. It doesn't talk about the removal power. That's just inherent in the ability to appoint, and there's a lot of cases I can go into with the federal government, but basically the president has the power to remove officers, but can't appoint unless the Congress agrees.
As council.
And that applies in similar vein to here, where the mayor can remove someone. I've never seen a mayor do it without talking to the council, because even if the mayor doesn't like someone, you can't get a new person to fill that spot until the council also agrees with the mayor. I shouldn't say that. I have seen one very bad situation where there was a lot of drama, but.
Couldn't
So we've
we
just put a
codify
fear
that
through all
though?
the city employees.
I just don't know why the mayor can be in there that's saying that he just has to do these things with some consent or discussion with the council. I mean, that's why the council is here. Because, I mean, at the first you preface this by saying we have, quote, a weak mayor and a strong council, but then as you go through the things, it sounds like the council doesn't have a lot of authority in some things. So I have on this prepare and submit ordinances, I'm happy to have the staff do that, but if you look at the state legislature, it's kind of like saying the only ones that can set the agenda is the governor, and so the state legislators can't submit legislation. Well, that's what they do. And so I think as a council, we should have the ability to put something on
And I think
the
that was in
agenda.
that policies and procedures, I thought they could.
It is, and I'll also add this,
Yeah.
I think I'll off the bullet point, there's actually a specific state statute that says, 2 council members, basically, if you're you can call a special meeting. So anytime to hold a meeting outside of your regular scheduled ones, and either the mayor or 2 council members can call that meeting to discuss an agenda topic. How that gets applied more in practice is if 2 council members want something, they can get on the agenda, because otherwise they can just force a special meeting to happen.
And that has happened in the city.
So I think policy-wise, it's also good to clarify that not just, we don't have to go to the extreme of having special meetings. It still is a power that is retained by the council, but also have the ability to make sure it's clear that the council can also request items to be put on. I will say, I think the distinction between the strong and weak mayor is, it all comes down to what the council wants, and it means the way that the council is strong is not individually, but as a group. If you have a unanimous council, the council can essentially strip the mayor of every power he has except to run the meetings.
We would never do that.
But that's...
I have laughs on the side, and yet we won't do that. I'm going, I feel like I'm at Halloween right now. We got it done.
We would never do that. Kurt, you're a great mayor, so we appreciate you. Yeah, you've been a great mayor. Yeah.
So, but with that, there is a difference between officers and general employees of the city. So the mayor, as we've discussed, and you could actually, this would be a thing that you could change in the code. The mayor would get to vote on it. And we'd have to have a unanimous council, or the mayor would also have to be on board, and you have a majority of the council.
Just what you're saying is change it.
Change it so you cannot remove an officer without...
And I'll be honest, I'm not really against that. I'm just going, I think we have to have level heads. You don't want emotions.
And honestly, if you have a mayor that's in favor of that, you might as well change it now, because otherwise you have to have a unanimous council.
So, but traditionally, a city administrator is hired and fired. So how do you delineate that here?
So the city administrator is, again, appointed by the mayor with vice council. I've never seen it done where the council's not involved from the very beginning, because the council's never going to approve something they don't like. But then usually you have it in the agreement that every city administrator or city manager contract I've seen says the council makes the decision to remove. Now, you don't have to have it that way, but that's how it has been for all of Highland's
history.
And I think it makes sense that you'd have the council on board with that. So again, that's something you could modify by agreement, and usually you'd like to, because otherwise you have one person who might decide the city administrator's job, even if the council, is in favor of that person.
So when it says the mayor has power to appoint, who can I appoint?
So what they call statutory offices. Those are all the offices specifically named in statute as city officers. So again, it's recorder, treasurer.
And I have to present the name. If I don't present a name, they can't vote on it. When I'm saying the mayor has to present a name, that's the power of the mayor. He presents the name. If he doesn't bring the name, they can't vote.
Oh, just the court judge. Yes, but that's...
The city administrator hired all those positions, though.
Yes. The city administrator's been hiring them.
That's where
I do, and I'm not going to say that it's happened every time, but hopefully what we've done is, yes, we go through the normal staff hiring process, but then it is actually brought to you for your ratification, essentially.
Well, but there's been instances where that didn't
I was going to say, I'm sure has not always happened.
Yeah,
but
I think this is good to clarify this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do remember when Stephanie came, we all voted to bring her. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure when Andy came. So that's what I think the council's questioning going. And I'm not saying we wouldn't have Andy, but I'm just saying that was not done that way.
And city engineer is one of those ones that's also called out in the state statute about having certain duties, and they have to be licensed and all of these things, and city attorney as well. We're also the ones that are called out in statute that you can fire at will without having to go through the whole due process thing, so.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
Brittany's not here. Do you have crumble?
So are you saying that Andy kind of slipped in through the cracks?
Yeah.
Well, no, this is
we really like
No,
you.
but this is what we're going through, is to learn this. We always think we're going, hey, here we've sat here for a while. This is good because there's questions that come up.
Yeah, this is
and to be honest, maybe there's some things we need to correct, such as the mayor has appointment. He can just remove individuals. I think for the safety of the city, and I know that I think we want to have, he has to have the consent of the council. I'm just,
I agree.
I'm not, this is not a power situation. I think we gotta be level-headed.
Especially the
Yes.
senior member.
So our code, city code says that power, the power to appoint and to remove or terminate the high-level city officers is not given to the city administrator. It's retained by the mayor specifically.
I think it's
But
fair.
once you get below that level of the statutory officers, then everything else flows to the city administrator to manage employment decisions, because the city administrator is the CEO, well, technically CAO, of employees of Highland City. So, that is, I think that one. Do I have another slide, or is that it? Oh, so I was actually going to get to this. You anticipated the issue, Councilmember Smith. So what it means, the city code talks about a little bit about presiding, and says the mayor presides as chair over the city council meetings. Again, doesn't really get into a lot of details on what that means. It just says presides. It reaffirms the city council can pass all ordinances, rules, and make all regulations. And this is a quote. The city council may require from every officer of the city at any time a report in detail of all transactions in his office or any matters connected therewith. So you can call us up and call us on the carpet and harangue us for...
But we can talk to the staff.
We're allowed to talk to you guys.
You are allowed, but there's probably a courtesy, there's probably an appropriate orders that you don't just also
Yeah, we're
jump.
getting away
so that
from that.
people don't
So
know.
we bring crumble cookie first and then talk, okay?
So yes, but this is the little bit distinction in the employment things, because it says all employees report to the city administrator, but the council also has the ability to call up people and talk to them when they need to. As a matter of practice, you try to flow and, keep the city administrator and city mayor in the loop, because they kind of run the employment matters, but yes, you can talk to employees.
But we could put a stipulation in there that to keep the city administrator in the loop, so she at this time knows what's going on.
Yes.
Because I think it's a problem if we're kind of going, and so she doesn't know what's going on. And so maybe we ought to put that stipulation in. I would support that.
We could modify this ordinance to make it a little bit clear about how that should work, as well as updating the removal process.
But I think we should feel comfortable talking to the staff, but maybe just have Aaron involved. Right. Would you feel comfortable with that as city administrator?
I would appreciate that, yes, Councilmember Smith.
And I think it's appropriate to have there. I think there's courtesy, since that employee reports to them. If you're asking for them to do any type of task, that their supervisor knows.
One thing I'd like to bring up, Draper's adopted a policy that says essentially, if it's a readily available thing, please talk to the staff. If it requires, a decent amount of work, that's where we need a majority of council to say, yes, go and do, from a prioritization standpoint, so.
Okay, that's a good change.
And the final note, this is both state law and city code. Kelly, call her for a report right now. No, just a final, two city council members.
I haven't had that authority, Kelly, and I haven't heard any of us doing that.
So 2 city council members or the mayor can call a special meeting on any topic. And in practice, that usually means 2 council members or the mayor can adjust the agenda or add things to the agenda. As a practice, again, we need to update our policy so it's reflected. Items have been added in by the city administrator, because city administrator has the authority under code to bring things to you. The mayor, previous council as a majority, as we've been doing better at these discussion items where we ask, would you be interested in this? And you say yes, so then we'll bring that back to you later, or at the request of residents and developers. So, but we can certainly, I think we want to clarify that, so that gets to our next slide.
Set a special meeting on topic. Now, when you're saying that could be an agenda item, you're not, because it makes it sound like they can hurry up and pull a special meeting.
They can.
Yeah,
I understand they can, but what we're saying, that also says they can put it on the meeting agenda, a topic to be discussed.
If you have 2 council members who want to discuss something, don't force them, by my recommendation, don't force them to call a special meeting, because that usually means there's a fight over, it gets kind of tense that way.
9:53.
Allow them to bring it on the agenda. But there are times that special meetings may be necessary, and that's why that power is there.
So I'm going to give an example. So in April of first part of May 2009, we were stuck on the east-west corridor, my neighborhood, the city, and different things. And there was a lot of this going on. And so I worked with two council members, Brian Brenson and Catherine Schramm, and the city administrator at that time, and we called a special meeting of the council, and the council was agreeable to that. The mayor was furious. But in the end, it worked out. That's how the east-west corridor came to pass. It was a compromise, but we could get people to do it, so. That has happened in the city.
And say that reinforces the point that when it's a strong council form of government like this is, it's a council as a group that is strong. Ultimately, if you can get 3 votes, sometimes you need 4 or 5 depending on what you're doing, but if you have the votes, whatever you want to have happen happens. Even if the mayor or city administrator disagrees with that, because ultimately the council can force something through because they believe it's in the best interest of the city. That's where your power lies, ultimately. So, in terms of next steps, we had kind of this background on what our code is and what state law is. I had written this thinking we kind of had a policy. We apparently have one, but it's likely not up to date. Do you want us to bring this back and kind of have a discussion on this? It's been brought up several times, and we haven't, it sounds like, not formally adopted kind of updates to the council procedures. It sounds like there might be some code changes we might want to do on things. We want to get your feedback on how to move forward. Did you want to have a work session on code? Did you want to have maybe a council committee, or do you just want to have staff take a stab based on direction and then keep having discussion?
I would lean towards having the staff take a stab, because I think we've made some direction here tonight. Because I like this on the state, I'm glad to see it again, because I think it really clarifies the issues. But, I think there's a couple ideas that we threw out, like maybe if the mayor removes people, that he discusses it with the council. I don't think that's a big problem. And I think it's great that council should feel comfortable talking with the staff, but maybe just kind of in the policy say, run it through the city administrator, and so that they're aware of what's going on. But the city administrator just can't say, hey, you're not going to talk to them, But I think it's important to keep the city administrator in the loop, so they're not taken by surprise. And I probably didn't say that really very well, but as new city administrator, Aaron, do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely, Councilmember Smith.
But you basically would never be in a position to say, oh, no, you can't talk to them, because we would like to be able to talk to people.
I would like you to, and I would like staff to be able to talk to you, absolutely.
Because I felt sometimes in the past where we were kind of told not to talk to the staff.
What I would say is kind of what I said earlier. I would have concerns if you were trying to give staff a project that would take an inordinate amount of time as a single council member. That's where I would have a concern, but asking questions, certainly I would encourage you to do.
Okay.
I agree with.
So this is so what we're saying is we're going to have staff take a look at updating the council procedures and policy. Is it something we want to have council just to come back and then we discuss? Do we want any overview as they're going through it? I mean, there is a procedure manual.
My thought is, Mayor, if I may, so I can send out what is currently on the books as well as the 3 different draft versions we found, and I'd invite you to give us feedback more than just what I've heard tonight. Things that you really liked, things that you thought were missing, to give us feedback, and we'll work to that to draft. So I sent an email to many of you, or to you, to see about doing a work session on November 29th, and I'm wondering if that would be the appropriate time to kind of come back with a draft and start getting some comments on a draft at that point.
I think that's fine. I could come. The 3rd draft, though, that we talked about 2 or 3 years ago was very controversial.
Yes.
And I don't know, Kurt, what you thought about it, but I thought we didn't.
We did not move forward. Each time there was one that was brought up in 2008. Which one was voted on? Because the 2008 they kept on pushing off. Then there was the one that came up 2 or 3 years ago that had some questions. This is just to help us, and I think if we go through it, we chime in, we need to get it the way we'd like it. Sure. I'm not trying to do a power play or anything that way. It's more of a clarification.
One was finally, so Stephanie has a long history, like you said, Mayor, 2008. It was a 60-page document that never got adopted. in 2008, 2009 timeframe. 2010, it was discussed again. There was one finally approved in 2012 that's very simple. And then, like Councilmember Smith said, another one was brought up 2019-ish.
Yes.
That never was approved because there was a lot of concerns with that. And so I'm happy to send out what we currently have and then drafts, but again, no comments to their drafts, just saying these are some of the things that previous council and or staff were thinking about at the time.
Well, and I think it's important to keep it simple, like they did in 2012.
Not a 60-page document, please.
Yeah, we don't need a 60-page.
We'll bring that back. We're now looking now at a November 29th meeting to do that at.
Does that work for everyone? I've heard from a couple of you, but not others.
On my calendar.
I can do it.
Thank you.
Was it 6 or 7 p.m.?
You know, this one we were hoping to do more of so we'll probably be doing a bit of team building ahead of time. And so we would like to do a 6 o'clock, have some dinner, make it a bit more social from that regard, and then move into, honestly, this would probably be the only item of quote unquote business, because we really wanted this to be more of a team building social type of a meeting.
I love it.
And Erin, will you just send that out in an email
Yes.
that it's now set?
And I'm sorry, Councilmember Bills text Kelly something I wanted to address. She asked about, so for example, for the viewpoint item, or another one where 2 council members requested it to be on the meeting, how is it handled in terms of who writes the report and things like that? And so traditionally it has been staff writes the report based on, it's a staff report, so staff has written the report, but we understand that there's some interest in having council be able to weigh in on that, and we're not opposed to that. And so that's something that will come back as a part of this draft policy.
I agree. I think if the 2 council bring it in, they should have an opportunity to also do a presentation or be involved in that aspect, because it's really their agenda item.
Right.
They're asking staff maybe to give, hey, what's the code, what's the current codes, that to help with understanding that, but then there needs to be, there's a reason they brought it, what's the reasoning that they want to discuss. So, okay, we got to hurry, it's 10, and we're done. Now, here's just a couple of items, because next Monday, we have our trunk or treat. Is everyone able to make the trunk or treat?
What time does it start?
Is that, and I believe that's at 5, correct?
I'm almost certain it's 5 to 7.
5 to 7.
I'll be there, but I'll be late.
And where is it at?
Assuming the weather holds out, right at the Splash Pad Park.
Splash pad at this time. If not, we'll move in here to the council.
And that's
Tuesday or Monday?
I'm sorry, Monday the
Monday.
25th.
Wait,
I mean, 24th. Monday the 24th. I am
so
sorry.
unfortunately, there's bad weather coming Sunday.
I know.
It's going to be cold. We're just hoping that it's not rainy in addition to cold.
what do we need to bring?
Do we want to, I mean, we need a, we can have a table. I asked Miranda maybe for a table.
Yes,
Out there.
absolutely.
Do we need to bring a tablecloth?
No, we'll provide you a table and a tablecloth and a canopy. And if you want to do any decorations beyond that, we would encourage that.
Do we want to do any game? Do we want just hand candy? Do we want to have, does anyone have the little cornhole things you can chuck? I mean, do we want to engage the kids at all with anything?
We have some small, the yard games that we bring out for various open houses. We're happy to provide one of those to you.
Why don't we
council.
have, if you guys can help us with some of the games,
Yeah.
I think it'd be a good thing. Let them play a little game to get candy, but we also then can just ask the parents where they're from, and it allows us to have a little bit of interaction, even with the kids, instead of just putting it in there. I think we want to interact. To me, at least, that's.
Sure. Hopefully the weather will cooperate.
Do you have to can everyone be in costume?
Yeah, including Brittany.
Brittany also said that she would be there. She's
In
typing
costume?
right now.
In costume?
Emma, you
No.
can go. No. Tell her to come as a school teacher. Okay, then we have our next city council meetings on November 1st. We do not have any other city council meetings now until November 29th. So there's a pretty good gap there. We do have tomorrow morning, we have Lone Peak Public Safety at 7:30 a.m. for those who are on Lone Peak Public Safety. Is there any other discussion items? If not,
Really quickly, Christmas party, I'm sorry, I sent out December 13th, and then I realized that's a planning commission. Would December 15th work for everyone? It's a
And that's
Thursday instead of the
Thursday
Tuesday.
night, December
Correct.
15th.
And this is one where spouses or partners are invited.
Okay.
they're not mandatory, but they're invited.
I'm taking that as yes.
Yes.
We're all ready
On
to
the
go.
December 15th, we now
Wonderful.
have down as for the Christmas party. on that. Okay,
Thank you, Mayor.
And that's a Thursday night.
Thursday night, December
Send
15th.
that out in the email too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, get them.
We do not have a closed session. There's nothing I'm aware of that needs to be discussed in closed session.
Correct, Mayor.
Okay, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
We are now adjourned.
Nice. Nice work.